Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Nightmare Narratives. I can picture some of you already in bed, maybe some of you just getting home from work. Wherever you are, whatever time it is, I'm glad you're here. If this helps you relax or sleep, please like and subscribe. It means a lot. Now let's get you comfortable, and I'll tell you tonight's story. My name is Dr. Elena Vasquez, and I need to tell you what happened in the mountains of West Virginia 3 months ago. I'm a child psychologist from Baltimore. I've spent 15 years helping kids who've been through terrible things. I thought I'd seen everything. I was wrong. It started with a phone call on a cold October morning. Sheriff Clayton Murdoch from Tucker County called my office. His voice sounded tired, like he hadn't slept in days. "Doc, we got 3 kids here," he said. "Found them wandering naked in Dolly sods yesterday morning. They won't tell us their names, won't tell us where they came from. Thing is, they're not quite right." "Not right how?" I asked, already packing my bag. Cases like this were exactly why I got into this work. "You'll see when you get here. Just bring whatever equipment you need. And Doc, don't come alone if you can help it." The drive to West Virginia took 4 hours through winding mountain roads. The higher I climbed, the colder it got. By the time I reached the town of Netherton, fog hung so thick I could barely see 10 feet ahead. Netherton looked like a place time forgot. Most of the houses were empty, windows boarded up. The few people I saw watched me from their porches with unfriendly eyes. A rusted sign said the population was 47. It felt like even fewer. Sheriff Murdoch met me at the tiny police station. He was a big man with gray hair and worried eyes. His family had lived in these mountains for 4 generations, he told me. He knew everyone for 50 miles around. "These kids," he said, leading me down a hallway, "they don't match any missing person reports. We've checked everywhere. It's like they just appeared out of nowhere." He stopped at a door with a small window. "Take a look, but don't go in yet. I want to hear what you think first." I pressed my face to the glass and felt my blood turn cold. 3 children sat in perfect silence on metal chairs. 2 girls and a boy, maybe 8 or 9 years old. They stared straight ahead with completely black eyes. Not brown or dark blue, solid black like someone had painted over their pupils. They sat absolutely still, not fidgeting like normal kids do. Their breathing was so slow I had to watch carefully to see their chests move. When one turned her head to look directly at me, the other 2 turned at exactly the same time, like they shared one mind. "How long have they been sitting like that?" I whispered. 6 hours, Murdoch said. "Haven't moved except to turn and look at whoever comes to the window. Haven't asked for food or water. Haven't spoken a word." I studied the children more carefully. Their skin was pale, almost gray. They wore hospital gowns the sheriff had given them, but I could see their feet were dirty and cut up. Dried blood caked their toenails. "Where exactly did you find them?" "Up in the wilderness area, about 10 miles from here." Hunter called it in. Said they were just standing in a circle in the middle of a clearing, holding hands. When he got closer, they all turned and looked at him at the same time, just like they did to you. My heart was beating fast now. In 15 years, I'd never seen anything like this. "I need to examine them. Can you set up a room where I can talk to them one at a time?" Sheriff Murdoch shook his head. "Tried that already. Soon as you separate them, they start screaming. Not crying like normal kids, screaming like animals. Had to put them back together, or they'd have brought the whole building down." I watched the children for another minute. They never blinked. They never moved. They just stared with those terrible black eyes. "There's something else," Murdoch said quietly. "The place where we found them. Every tree in a 100-yard circle is dead. Leaves turned black. Overnight. Game wardens never seen anything like it. That's when I should have left. Should have called the state police and let them handle it. But I kept thinking about my daughter. Maria, who died in a car crash 3 years ago. She'd been 8 years old with dark hair just like these kids. If someone had found Maria scared and alone, I'd have wanted them to help her. "I'll need to examine them," I said. "Together, if that's how they need to be." Sheriff Murdoch nodded, but I could see the worry in his eyes. Just be careful, Doc. These mountains have seen strange things before. My grandfather used to tell stories about kids who went missing and came back different. Different how? He was quiet for a long moment. Different like these. The examination room was small and cold. I'd asked for all my equipment to be brought in. Laptop, recording device, basic medical tools. When they brought the children in, they moved together, like they were connected by invisible strings. "Hello," I said in my gentlest voice. "My name is Dr. Elena. What are your names?" They turned their black eyes on me but didn't answer. I tried again. "Are you hungry? Thirsty? Do you hurt anywhere?" Nothing. I pulled out my stethoscope. "I'm going to listen to your hearts, okay? It won't hurt." I approached the nearest child, a girl with tangled brown hair. The moment the stethoscope touched her chest, I jerked back. Her heartbeat was so slow I thought she might be dying. Maybe 40 beats per minute instead of the normal 100 for a child her age. When I checked her temperature, it was only 94 degrees. She should have been shivering, but she sat perfectly still. "Can you tell me where you live?" I asked. For the first time, one of them spoke. The boy opened his mouth and said, "We live in the deep places now." His voice was wrong, too deep for a child, and it echoed like he was speaking from inside a cave. "What deep places?" I asked. All three children smiled at the same time. Their teeth were sharp, filed to points like an animal's. "The places where the old shepherd keeps his flock," the second girl said in that same deep, echoing voice. My hands were shaking as I wrote notes. I'd worked with traumatized children before. Some acted strange, even violent. But this felt different. This felt impossible. "Who is the shepherd?" I asked. They tilted their heads in unison, like dogs hearing a distant sound. "He is coming to collect what is his," they said together, their voices blending into a horrible harmony. The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees in seconds. I could see my breath in the air. My laptop screen flickered and went black. "He knows you have his children," they said. "He knows you are keeping them from home." I stood up too fast, knocking over my chair. "Sheriff," I called. The door opened immediately. Murdoch must have been listening right outside. "Everything okay in here, Doc?" I looked back at the children. They sat in normal poses now, looking confused and scared like regular kids. The room temperature felt normal again. My laptop was working fine. Yes, everything's fine." But it wasn't fine. Over the next 2 hours, I tried every technique I knew to get them to talk normally. Sometimes they acted like regular children, scared, confused, asking for their parents. Other times, they spoke in that deep voice about shepherds and deep places and coming home. The worst part was when they started talking in languages I didn't recognize. Old-sounding words that made my skin crawl. I recorded everything, thinking maybe a linguistics expert could help. During one of their normal moments, the brown-haired girl grabbed my hand. Her fingers were ice cold. "Please help us," she whispered. "We don't want to go back to the dark, but he's calling us. We can't stop hearing him call our names." "What names?" I asked. "What are your real names?" Her eyes filled with tears. "I can't remember. He took our names away. He took everything away and filled us with dark instead." Then her eyes went solid black again, and she smiled with those sharp teeth. "The shepherd protects his flock," she said in that terrible deep voice. "Soon all the lost children will come home." I ran from that room. I'm not proud of it, but I ran. Sheriff Murdoch found me outside, throwing up behind my car. "You saw it too," he said. It wasn't a question. I wiped my mouth and tried to pull myself together. "Those aren't normal children. Something's wrong with them. Something's very wrong." "My grandfather told stories," Murdoch said, staring up at the fog-covered mountains. "Said every 20 or 30 years, children would disappear from these mountains. Most never came back. The ones who did..." He shook his head. "They weren't the same kids who went missing." "What happened to them?" "Families tried to keep them, tried to pretend everything was normal. But they couldn't eat regular food anymore, couldn't stand sunlight. and they kept trying to go back to wherever they'd been taken. I thought about the girl's cold hand, her desperate whisper for help. "Sheriff, I need to see where you found them. Tonight." "That's not a good idea, Doc. Those children are trapped inside their own minds. Something's controlling them, making them say and do things. If I can figure out what happened to them, maybe I can help them." Murdoch was quiet for a long time. Finally, he nodded. "I'll take you up there. But we're bringing guns, and we're not staying after dark." "Deal." As I got back in my car to follow him, I heard something that made my blood freeze. Through the police station walls, I could hear the children singing. It was a lullaby my daughter Maria used to sing, a song I'd never taught anyone else. How could they possibly know that song? The drive up the mountain took an hour on roads that got worse the higher we climbed. Sheriff Murdoch drove his patrol car in front while I followed in my Honda, struggling to keep up on the steep, winding dirt paths. The fog got thicker as we went up. Headlegs. HTS barely cut through it, and the temperature outside dropped to nearly freezing. When we finally stopped, we were in the middle of nowhere. "This is it," Murdoch said, pulling 2 heavy flashlights from his trunk. He also had a shotgun, which he loaded with practiced movements. "The clearing's about a quarter-mile through those trees." The forest felt wrong the moment we entered it. No bird sounds, no insects, no rustling of small animals. Just our footsteps on dead leaves and the sound of our breathing in the cold air. "Sheriff," I said after a few minutes of walking, "how many children have gone missing from around here over the years?" "More than there should be," he said. "I've been sheriff for 20 years. In that time, maybe 8 or 9 kids have vanished without a trace. Always in October, always during a full moon." "What do the families say?" "Most move away after a year or 2. Can't stand living in the same place where they lost their child. The ones who stay..." He paused. "The ones who stay get strange. Start talking about hearing their kids calling to them from the mountains. Some try to go looking and never come back themselves." We walked in silence for a while. Then Murdoch stopped suddenly and grabbed my arm. "Look at the trees." I shone my flashlight around and gasped. Every tree within sight was dead. Not just dying. Completely dead, like they'd been poisoned. The bark was black and peeling. No leaves remained on any branch. "This wasn't like this 3 days ago," Murdoch said. "When we found those kids, the trees were normal. This happened after." We kept walking. The dead zone got worse the farther we went. Soon we were walking through what looked like a forest fire had swept through, except there was no smell of smoke, just the smell of rot and something else, something chemical and sharp that made my nose burn. "There," Murdoch said, pointing ahead. In a circular clearing about 50 feet across, the ground was completely bare. No grass, no fallen leaves, nothing. The dirt looked like it had been burned, leaving only gray, ash. In the center of the clearing were 3 small piles of children's clothing. Torn jeans, sneakers, a Disney princess t-shirt. They looked like they'd been there for months, weathered and faded. "These aren't from the kids we found," I said, kneeling beside one pile. "These clothes are too old." "I know," Murdoch said grimly. "I think we're looking at evidence from previous disappearances." I stood up and swept my flashlight around the clearing. That's when I saw them. Footprints in the ash. Small, child-sized footprints leading from each pile of clothes to the center of the clearing, where they formed a perfect circle. But these weren't normal footprints. Each one showed 6 toes. And instead of toe prints, there were claw marks. "Jesus Christ," Murdoch whispered. I followed the prints with my flashlight beam. They didn't lead out of the clearing. They just stopped at that center circle, like whatever made them had vanished into thin air. That's when we heard the singing. It was coming from deeper in the forest, past the clearing. Children's voices singing that same lullaby I'd heard at the police station. The lullaby my dead daughter used to sing. "We need to go," Murdoch said. "Right now." But I was already walking toward the sound. I couldn't help myself. It sounded so much like Maria. "Doc, stop!" Murdoch called, but I kept going. The singing got louder as I entered the trees on the far side of the clearing. My flashlight showed more dead trees, more poisoned ground. And then I saw something that made me stop breathing. A cave opening in the side of a rocky hill. The singing was coming from inside, and around the cave entrance were more piles of children's belongings. Dozens of them. Clothes and toys and backpacks going back years, maybe decades. "Maria?" I called out. I know it was stupid. I knew my daughter was dead. But the singing sounded exactly like her. The singing stopped. In the silence, I heard footsteps coming from inside the cave. Small, quick footsteps, getting closer. "Elena, we need to leave now," Murdoch said, grabbing my arm. But it was too late. They came out of the cave in a line, walking in perfect step. Not just the 3 children from the police station. 6 more kids I'd never seen before, all with the same black eyes and sharp teeth. All singing my daughter's lullaby in voices too deep for their small bodies. They formed a circle around us, still singing. I counted 9 children total, ranging from maybe 6 years old to 12. Their skin was gray-white in my flashlight beam, and they didn't blink or look away from us. "The shepherd wants to meet you," one of them said. A boy who couldn't have been more than 7 years old. "He has something that belongs to you." "We don't have anything of his," Murdoch said, raising his shotgun. All 9 children smiled those horrible, sharp smiles. "Not something," they said in unison. "Someone." That's when I heard another voice from inside the cave, a voice I recognized, a voice that had been silent for 3 years. "Mommy? Mommy, where are you? I'm scared, Mommy. Please, come help me." It was Maria, my dead daughter Maria, calling for me from inside that terrible cave. I started walking toward the cave entrance. I couldn't stop myself. Every rational part of my mind was screaming that this was impossible, that Maria was dead, that this was some kind of trick. But her voice was exactly right. The fear, the need, the way she used to call for me when she had nightmares. "Elena, that's not your daughter," Murdoch said. "Your daughter is dead. This thing, whatever it is, it's using your grief against you." But I kept walking. The children parted to let me through, still singing that lullaby. Their black eyes followed my every move. "Mommy, please," Maria's voice called from the darkness. "The bad man won't let me leave. I want to come home." I was almost at the cave entrance when Murdoch fired his shotgun into the air. The blast echoed off the AM. Mountains like thunder. The children stopped singing and turned to look at him with expressions of cold anger. "Don't," one of them said in a voice like grinding stone. "The shepherd doesn't like loud noises." The temperature dropped again so fast that frost began forming on the dead trees around us. My breath came out in thick clouds, and from deep inside the cave came another sound. Not my daughter's voice this time. Something much older, much hungrier. A sound like wind through empty spaces, but with words hidden inside it. "Bring her to me," the voice whispered. "Bring me the one who grieves. I will give her what she wants most." The children started walking toward us again, and I could see they weren't entirely human anymore. Their fingers ended in sharp black claws. Their movements were too fluid, like they were floating instead of walking. "Run," Murdoch said. This time, I listened. We ran through the dead forest like our lives depended on it. Behind us, I could hear the children following. Not running. They moved through the trees without making any noise, which was somehow worse than if they'd been crashing through the underbrush. Murdoch led the way with his flashlight, finding the path back to our cars. But every time I looked over my shoulder, I could see pale shapes moving between the trees, keeping pace with us effortlessly. "The cars," Murdoch panted. "Get to the cars and we'll be okay." But when we reached the spot where we'd parked, both vehicles had all 4 tires slashed. The metal was twisted and torn like giant claws had ripped through it. "How did they get here before us?" I gasped. "They didn't," Murdoch said grimly. "There are more of them." He was right. As I turned in a circle, I counted at least 15 children standing at the edge of the forest, watching us with those black eyes. Some looked like they'd been missing for months. Their sleek walls. Others were rotted, their hair matted and dirty. Others looked fresher, like they'd been taken recently. All of them had the same six-toed footprints. All of them had those terrible sharp teeth. "What do you want?" I called out. One of them stepped forward. A girl who couldn't have been more than 10, wearing a school uniform from what looked like the 1980s. "The shepherd wants to make a trade," she said. "Your memories of grief for your daughter's return." "My daughter is dead." "Death is just another place," the girl said. "The shepherd can bring her back. Give her form again. All you have to do is let him take away the pain of losing her." I felt tears freezing on my cheeks. "What's the catch?" "No catch. Just understanding. The shepherd feeds on strong emotions. Grief, fear, love, loss. In exchange, he gives back what was taken. Your daughter, his flock, everyone happy. And what happens to me?" The girl smiled, and I could see too many teeth in her mouth. "You become part of the family. Like us. No more pain. No more fear. Just peace in the deep places." More children emerged from the forest. I stopped counting at 20. They formed concentric circles around us, getting closer with each step. "Elena, don't listen to them," Murdoch said. He still had his shotgun, but I could see his hands shaking. "Whatever's controlling these kids, it's not going to give you your daughter back. It's going to take you too." "But what if it could?" I whispered. "What if I could see Maria again?" "Look at these children," Murdoch said urgently. "Really look at them. Do they look happy to you? Do they look peaceful?" I studied the faces around us. Now that he mentioned it, I could see something in their black eyes. Not peace, hunger. And underneath the hunger, trapped and screaming, the terrified faces of the children they used to be. "They're prisoners," I realized. "All of them. And that thing isn't giving them peace. It's feeding off them." "The shepherd protects his flock," all the children said at once, but their voices sounded strained, like they were fighting against the words. "How long have you been trapped?" I asked them directly. For just a moment, their black eyes flickered back to normal colors. Brown, blue, green, hazel. And in that moment, I saw pure terror. "Help us," one of them whispered. "Please help us." Then their eyes went black again, and they stepped closer. "Come to the deep places," they chanted. "Come home to the shepherd." That's when I heard my daughter's voice again, but this time it was different. Desperate. Real. "Mommy, don't let him take you too. Run, Mommy, run!" I understood then. Whatever was in that cave had been using Maria's voice to lure me in, but the real Maria, or whatever was left of her, was trying to warn me away. "We're not going anywhere with you," I said firmly. The children all tilted their heads at the same angle, like broken dolls. "Then you'll stay here," they said. "Forever and always. The shepherd has been patient, but his patience has limits." The temperature dropped again. Ice began forming on our clothes, on the slashed car tires, on the dead trees around us. The children's breath came out in clouds, but mine and Murdoch's stopped showing at all, like the air itself was too cold to hold moisture. "There's something I need to tell you," Murdoch said quietly, "about my family, about why I've stayed in these mountains all these years." "What?" "My little sister Sarah disappeared in 1962. I was 15. We searched for months, never found her. But 3 years later she came back, just walked out of these same woods during a thunderstorm, naked and confused. My heart was pounding. Was she like them? For a while. She had the black eyes, the sharp teeth, couldn't eat regular food. But my parents, they fought for her, kept her inside, away from these mountains, fed her raw meat when that's all she could stomach. And slowly, over months, she got better. The real Sarah Cage, me back. Where is she now? Living in California with her grandkids. She doesn't remember what happened to her in those 3 years. Doesn't remember anything about shepherds or deep places. But sometimes on nights like this, she calls me. Says she can feel something calling her back to West Virginia. The children were getting closer. I could smell them now, that same chemical rotting smell from the dead forest. The point is, Murdoch continued, they can be saved. Maybe not all of them, but some. If we can break whatever hold this thing has on them. How? I think it has to do with that cave. That's where it lives, where it keeps them when they're not out hunting for more kids. If we could collapse it somehow. With what? We don't have dynamite. Murdoch smiled grimly. Actually, we do. There's an old mining camp about 2 miles from here. Been abandoned since the 1950s, but I know they left equipment behind, including explosives. The children were only 10 feet away now. I could see the desperate, trapped expressions flickering behind their black eyes. Can you get us there? If we can get past them first. I looked at the circle of possessed children closing in on us. Some part of me, the part that had spent 15 years helping traumatized kids, couldn't stand the thought of hurting them. But I could see in their faces that whatever was left of their original selves wanted to be free. Do it, I said. Murdoch raised his shotgun and fired into the air again. The blast scattered the nearest children, and we ran for the tree line. Behind us, they began to scream. Not with human voices, but with the sound of wind through broken stone, of water flowing over bones, of things that should stay buried, crawling up from deep earth. We ran toward whatever chance we had of stopping this nightmare. The mining camp was exactly where Sheriff Murdoch said it would. DB. Old wooden buildings falling apart, rusted equipment scattered around, and most importantly, a storage shed with boxes of dynamite that were still dry despite being abandoned for decades. Will this stuff still work? I asked, helping him load sticks of dynamite into a canvas bag. Should. Dynamite doesn't really go bad, just gets more unstable, which might work in our favor. We could hear the children calling to us from the forest, not screaming anymore, but singing again. That same lullaby, getting closer. They're herding us back toward the cave, I realized. That's what I'm counting on. The walk back took forever. Every shadow looked like a child's shape. Every sound made us freeze and listen. But we made it to the cave entrance without being directly confronted. The singing was coming from deep inside now, echoing off stone walls. It sounded like dozens of voices, maybe hundreds. How many children had this thing taken over the years? I'm going in, I said. Elena, no, we blow it from out here. Those children are still alive in there, still aware. I can't just bury them without trying to help. Murdoch grabbed my arm. That thing will take you too. Maybe, but I have to try. My daughter's voice, the real Maria, not the thing imitating her. She told me to run. That means some part of her is still fighting this creature. Maybe the other kids are fighting too. I took half the dynamite and started into the cave. The singing got louder with every step. My flashlight showed walls covered in children's drawings, stick figures holding hands, houses with smiling families, pictures of the sun, messages scratched into the stone. Help us, and make it stop, and I want to go home. The cave opened into a massive chamber. My flashlight couldn't reach the ceiling or the far walls, and everywhere, covering the floor and walls, were crystals. Not natural cave formations, but structures that pulsed with a faint red light. Inside each crystal was a child. Not dead children. Living children, their eyes open, their mouths moving in silent screams. The crystals were some kind of prison, keeping them alive while something fed off their fear and pain. At the center of the chamber was the largest crystal of all. Inside it, I could see a figure that looked like Maria. My Maria. But I knew it wasn't really her. This was just another trap. You came, said a voice from everywhere and nowhere. The walls themselves seemed to be speaking. I knew you would. Grief is the strongest emotion. It calls to us across time and space. Let them go, I said, placing dynamite around the base of several crystals. Let them go where? Back to lives that will end in 70 years anyway. Here, they live forever. Here, they feed me with their fear, and I give them purpose. This isn't purpose. This is torture. All life is torture, Elena. I simply make it serve a function. I kept placing explosives, working my way around the chamber. The entity kept talking, trying to distract me. I can give you what you want most. Your daughter, alive and healthy. All her memories intact. She'll remember your bedtime stories, your silly songs, the way you used to make pancakes on Saturday mornings. I had to stop for a moment. The offer was everything I'd wanted for 3 years. The catch? I managed to ask. No catch. Just join my family. Let me ease your pain the way I've eased theirs. I looked at the children trapped in crystals. Their mouths were still moving in those silent screams. That's not easing their pain, I said. That's feeding off it. Pain gives life meaning. Without loss, how would they know joy? Without fear, how would they appreciate safety? I give their suffering purpose. I placed the last stick of dynamite and began connecting the fuses. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely manage it. Elena, the voice said, and now it sounded exactly like Maria. Mommy, please don't leave me here alone. I'm scared, Mommy. Loosed my eyes and tried to remember the real Maria. Not this imitation, but my actual daughter. Her laugh when I tickled her feet, the way she'd fall asleep in my lap while I read to her, her stubborn refusal to eat vegetables, the millions of tiny moments that made her real. You're not my daughter, I said. I could be. I could be exactly her. Every memory, every habit, every dream she never got to fulfill. But you wouldn't be Maria. You'd be something wearing her face, feeding off my grief forever. I lit the fuses and ran for the cave entrance. Behind me, the entity's voice changed from my daughter's to something ancient and furious. You don't understand. Without me, they're just dead children. With me, they have eternal purpose. I made it out of the cave just as Sheriff Murdoch's explosives went off from the other side. The combined blast shook the whole mountain. The cave entrance collapsed in a shower of rocks and dirt, but I could still hear singing from under the rubble. Faint, but there. Did we get it? Murdoch asked. I listened for a long moment. The singing was getting weaker, but it was still there. I don't know. We waited until dawn, sitting by our ruined cars and listening to the mountain. As the sun came up, the singing finally stopped. That was 3 months ago. The official report blamed the cave-in on geological instability. The town of Netherton was evacuated and condemned. The 3 children we'd found were placed in a special care facility. They don't remember anything about shepherds or deep places, but they still won't eat cooked meat, and they have nightmares every night. I visit them once a week. Sometimes I think I see recognition in their eyes, like they remember me helping them. But mostly they just seem like normal, traumatized kids who need time to heal. I've been researching similar cases across Appalachia. There are patterns. Children disappearing near cave systems. Reports of changed behavior when they're found. Stories going back generations about things that live under mountains and feed on human emotion. The thing I killed wasn't unique. There are others. I can sense them now. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and I know there's one of these creatures calling to children somewhere within 100 miles of me. I can feel their hunger like a cold pressure in my chest. My fingernails are growing sharper. My body temperature has dropped 2 degrees. Sometimes I catch myself humming my daughter's lullaby without realizing it. I think part of that creature is still inside me. Not controlling me, but changing me. Making me into something that can hunt it and its kind. Maybe that's okay. Maybe that's what those mountains need. Someone who understands the danger, who can't be lured in by offers of reunion with dead loved ones. Last week I got reports of missing children in Pennsylvania. 3 kids, all disappeared during the October full moon, all near cave systems. I'm driving up there tomorrow. I still hear Maria's voice sometimes, but now I know it's really her. Not some creature wearing her memory, but my actual daughter, warning me when I'm getting too close to becoming something I shouldn't be. Be careful, Mommy, she whispers when I'm tracking these things. Don't let them make you like them. I won't. I promise I won't. But I can't stop hunting them either. There are too many lost children out there trapped in crystal prisons, singing lullabies while something feeds on their fear. Someone has to help them, and I think I'm the only one who can. My name is Dr. Elena Vasquez, and I need to tell you what happened in the mountains of West Virginia 3 months ago. I'm a child psychologist from Baltimore. I've spent 15 years helping kids who've been through terrible things. I thought I'd seen everything. I was wrong. It started with a phone call on a cold October morning. Sheriff Clayton Murdoch from Tucker County called my office. His voice sounded tired, like he hadn't slept in days. "Doc, we got 3 kids here," he said. "Found them wandering naked in Dolly Sods yesterday morning. They won't tell us their names, won't tell us where they came from. Thing is, they're not quite right." "Not right how?" I asked, already packing my bag. Cases like this were exactly why I got into this work. "You'll see when you get here. Just bring whatever equipment you need. And Doc, don't come alone if you can help it." The drive to West Virginia took 4 hours through winding mountain roads. The higher I climbed, the colder it got. By the time I reached the town of Netherton, fog hung so thick I could barely see 10 feet ahead. Netherton looked like a place time forgot. Most of the houses were empty, windows boarded up. The few people I saw watched me from their porches with unfriendly eyes. A rusted sign said the population was 47. It felt like even fewer. Sheriff Murdoch met me at the tiny police station. He was a big man with gray hair and worried eyes. His family had lived in these mountains for 4 generations, he told me. He knew everyone for 50 miles around. "These kids," he said, leading me down a hallway, "they don't match any missing person reports. We've checked everywhere. It's like they just appeared out of nowhere." He stopped at a door with a small window. "Take a look, but don't go in yet. I want to hear what you think first." I pressed my face to the glass and felt my blood turn cold. 3 children sat in perfect silence on metal chairs. 2 girls and a boy, maybe 8 or 9 years old. They stared straight ahead with completely black eyes. Not brown or dark blue, solid black like someone had painted over their pupils. They sat absolutely still, not fidgeting like normal kids do. Their breathing was so slow I had to watch carefully to see their chests move. When one turned her head to look directly at me, the other 2 turned at exactly the same time, like they shared one mind. "How long have they been sitting like that?" I whispered. 6 hours, Murdoch said. "Haven't moved except to turn and look at whoever comes to the window. Haven't asked for food or water. Haven't spoken a word." I studied the children more carefully. Their skin was pale, almost gray. They wore hospital gowns the sheriff had given them, but I could see their feet were dirty and cut up. Dried blood caked their toenails. "Where exactly did you find them?" "Up in the wilderness area, about 10 miles from here." Hunter called it in. Said they were just standing in a circle in the middle of a clearing, holding hands. When he got closer, they all turned and looked at him at the same time, just like they did to you. My heart was beating fast now. In 15 years, I'd never seen anything like this. "I need to examine them. Can you set up a room where I can talk to them one at a time?" Sheriff Murdoch shook his head. "Tried that already. Soon as you separate them, they start screaming. Not crying like normal kids, screaming like animals. Had to put them back together, or they'd have brought the whole building down." I watched the children for another minute. They never blinked. They never moved. They just stared with those terrible black eyes. "There's something else," Murdoch said quietly. "The place where we found them, every tree in a 100-yard circle is dead. Leaves turned black. Overnight. Game wardens never seen anything like it. That's when I should have left. Should have called the state police and let them handle it. But I kept thinking about my daughter. Reminded me of concrete dust, like when construction workers drill through sidewalks." "Hold up," Mike called from the back of our group. He was kneeling next to the trail, examining something. "Dr. Hayes, you need to see this." We all gathered around. Mike was pointing at what looked like a handprint pressed into solid rock, but it wasn't carved or painted on. The print was actually inside the stone, like someone had pressed their hand into wet concrete that then turned to granite. "That's impossible," Sarah Martinez whispered. "Granite doesn't form that way." Mary knelt beside the print and placed her own hand over it. The print was much larger, adult-sized. My grandfather told me about these. He said they were warnings. Warnings about what? I asked. Mary stood up and brushed dirt off her knees. About what happens when you don't listen to the mountain. We set up camp in a small clearing about half a mile from where we'd found the handprint. Dr. Hayes wanted to start taking rock samples right away, but Mary insisted we wait until morning. This place feels wrong at night, she said. Better to work during daylight. I thought she was being overly cautious, but I didn't argue. We pitched our tents in a circle and built a campfire in the center. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky deep red and orange. That's when we found the first family. Lisa was gathering firewood when she screamed. We all ran toward the sound and found her standing frozen about 50 yards from camp, staring at something in the trees. At first I thought they were statues. A family of 4, Mom, Dad, and 2 kids, standing on the trail like they were walking somewhere. They were perfectly detailed, carved from what looked like gray granite. The man had his arm around the woman's shoulders. One child was holding the woman's hand. The other was a few steps ahead, like H. He'd been running. But statues don't belong in the middle of a forest trail, and these weren't roughly carved like the kind you'd see in a park. Every detail was perfect. Individual hairs, the wrinkles in their clothes, even the expressions on their faces. The expressions were the worst part. They all looked terrified. "What the hell is that?" Mike whispered. Dr. Hayes walked closer to examine them. "Incredible. The detail is amazing. But how did they get here? There's no road big enough for a truck." "They're not statues," Mary said quietly. "What do you mean?" I asked. She pointed to the ground around the Granite family. "Look at their feet." I looked down and felt my stomach drop. The family wasn't standing on top of the ground. Their feet were sunk into the earth about 2 inches, like they'd been pressed down into soft dirt that had then hardened around them. "This is the Henderson family," Mary continued. "They went hiking last weekend. Park rangers have been looking for them for 6 days." "That's impossible," Dr. Hayes said. "People don't turn into stone. This has to be some kind of art installation." But even as he said it, I could tell he didn't believe his own words. The granite figures weren't just realistic. They were perfect. Every detail was exactly right, down to the hiking boots and backpacks. And there was something about their eyes. "We need to call the rangers," Sarah said, pulling out her radio. Static. Nothing but static on every channel. "Cell phones?" Lisa suggested. "No signal. Not even 1 bar." "The mountain blocks radio waves sometimes," Mary said, but she sounded worried now. "We should go back to town. Tell them what we found." "Wait," Dr. Hayes said. He was still studying the Granite family. "I need to take samples. This could be a completely new geological phenomenon." "No samples," Mary said firmly. "We leave now." But Dr. Hayes wasn't listening. He was already pulling out his equipment, a small drill for taking core samples from rock. He approached the granite figure of the father. "Don't," Mary said. "Please don't." Dr. Hayes ignored her and pressed the drill bit against the statue's arm. The drill wouldn't start. He checked the battery, full charge. He tried again. Nothing. "Equipment malfunction," he muttered, switching to a manual chisel and hammer. He lined up the chisel against the granite arm and struck it with the hammer. The chisel shattered like glass. We all stared at the broken tool. These were professional-grade geological instruments designed to cut through the hardest rocks. They don't just break. "Now can we leave?" Mary asked. But it was already too late. The granite father's head turned toward us. Just a little, maybe an inch. But I saw it. We all saw it. Lisa screamed. Mike stumbled backward and fell. Sarah dropped her equipment bag. The granite father's eyes, which had been staring straight ahead, were now looking right at Dr. Hayes. They were still made of stone, still gray and lifeless, but they were definitely looking at us. "Run," Mary whispered. Then louder, "Run!" We ran, left all our equipment except what we could grab in our arms and ran back toward the truck. Behind us, I could hear sounds that shouldn't exist, the grinding of stone against stone like giant millstones turning. But when we reached the parking area, our truck was gone. Not stolen, gone. In its place was a pile of granite rocks arranged roughly in the shape of a vehicle. "This isn't possible," Dr. Hayes kept saying. "This isn't possible." Mary was already leading us back up a different trail. "There's a ranger station 5 miles north. We can call for help from there." We hiked through the dark forest, using flashlights to navigate. Every shadow looked like another granite person. Every sound made us jump. The stone dust smell was stronger now, and I could taste it in the air. About 2 miles from where we'd started, Mike grabbed my arm. "James," he whispered, "look at my hands." Shined my flashlight on his palms. There were gray patches on his skin, rough and hard like concrete. "When did that happen?" I asked. "I don't know. They were normal this morning. I checked my own hands. Normal. But Mike's gray patches were spreading as we watched, creeping up his wrists like some kind of infection. "It doesn't hurt," he said, but his voice was shaking. "I can't feel anything in those spots." Mary took one look at Mike's hands and started walking faster. "How much further?" I called after her. "We need to move. Now." Behind us, something was following. I could hear it. The crunch of heavy footsteps, but with a grinding sound underneath like concrete being dragged across stone. I looked back and saw shapes moving between the trees. Human-shaped shadows, but wrong somehow. Too stiff. Too gray. "They're coming," I told Mary. "I know. Just keep moving." But the gray patches on Mike's hands were spreading faster now, climbing up his arms, and he was moving slower, like his joints were getting stiff. "Guys," he said, stopping in the middle of the trail, "I don't think I can keep up." We turned back to help him, but it was too late. Mike was standing perfectly still in the middle of the trail, his arms slightly raised like he'd been reaching for something. He'd turned to stone. His eyes were still Mike's eyes, still alive and aware, but the rest of him was solid granite. I could see the terror in his expression, frozen forever in rock. And behind him, walking slowly out of the forest, were dozens of other stone people, all coming toward us. We left Mike behind. I know that sounds terrible, but what else could we do? He was stone from the neck down, and there were granite figures walking out of the forest from every direction. Mary led us off the main trail onto a narrow path that wound between huge boulders. Dr. Hayes kept looking back toward where we'd lead. "F to Mike." His eyes were still moving, he whispered. "Did you see that?" He was still conscious. "Don't think about it," Mary said. "We need to focus on getting out of here." But I couldn't stop thinking about it. If Mike was still aware, still trapped inside that stone body, then what about the family we'd found? What about all those other granite figures following us through the forest? "Mary," I said as we climbed over a fallen log, "how long has this been happening?" "My grandfather's time, maybe longer." "Your grandfather saw this?" Mary nodded. "He was working with the government people in the 1930s. They were building trails through these mountains. One morning, half his crew didn't show up for work. They found them later, turned to stone, scattered through the forest. What did they do? Same thing everyone does. They covered it up, said it was an accident, moved the work crews to a different mountain." Sarah was examining her hands with her flashlight. "I've got gray spots too," she said quietly. I checked mine again. Still normal. But Sarah's fingertips were definitely turning gray, like Mike's had. "When did you first touch the rocks?" Mary asked. "This morning, when we found that handprint." "Lisa, what about you?" Lisa held up her hands, gray patches on her palms and fingers. "Dr. Hayes?" He examined his hands and nodded grimly, gray spots spreading across his knuckles. "James?" I looked again. My hands were still normal. "Nothing yet." Mary studied me carefully. "You didn't touch the handprint?" "No, I stayed back." "Good. Don't touch anything. Not rocks, not trees, not the ground if you can help it." We kept hiking, but it was getting harder for the others. Sarah was moving slowly, like her joints were stiffening. Lisa kept stumbling. Dr. Hayes was breathing heavily, like each step took tremendous effort. "It's getting worse," Sarah said. "I can't feel my feet anymore." Mary stopped and turned back to look at our group. There's something I haven't told you about why I agreed to guide you up here. Now seems like a good time, I said. My people have been watching this mountain for generations. We know about the thing that lives in the deep caves, the thing that's doing this to you. What kind of thing? Dr. Hayes asked. It's old. Older than the Cherokee, older than any people. It was here when these mountains were young, and it's dying. A grinding sound echoed through the forest behind us, getting closer. Dying how? I asked as we started moving again. The world changed around it, got too warm, too wet. The thing needs cold and dry to survive, like the ice ages. So it's trying to save itself the only way it knows how. By turning people to stone. By taking their life force. Everything that lives, people, animals, plants. It absorbs them into itself, makes them part of the mountain. Lisa stumbled and fell. When she tried to get up, her legs wouldn't bend right. The gray patches had spread all the way up to her waist. I can't move, she whispered. Mary knelt beside her. Lisa, listen to me. You need to fight this. Don't let it take your mind. What do you mean? The thing wants you to give up, to accept what's happening. If you keep fighting, keep thinking, you can slow it down. But even as Mary spoke, I could see Lisa's expression becoming blank and distant. The gray was spreading up her chest now. Lisa! I shook her shoulder. Stay with us! Her eyes focused on me for a moment. James, you have to get out of here. Tell people what happened. Don't let them come back. Then she was gone. Not dead. Worse than dead. Her body was still there, turned to solid stone, but her eyes had that same terrible awareness I'd seen in Mike's. Still conscious. Still trapped. We couldn't carry her. Couldn't help her. We had to keep moving. Sarah lasted another half-mile before the gray reached her heart. She sat down on a boulder and looked at me with eyes that were already getting glassy. Take care of yourself, James, she said, and don't blame yourself for this. Then she was stoned too. That left just me, Dr. Hayes, and Mary. But Dr. Hayes was struggling badly. The gray patches covered most of his arms and legs now, and he was moving like a robot with rusty joints. Go on without me, he said, leaning against a tree. I'll slow you down. We're not leaving anyone else, I said. But Mary grabbed my arm. James, look around. I looked. We were surrounded by stone people, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, standing among the trees like a forest of granite statues. Men, women, children, all frozen in place with expressions of terror or confusion, and they were all looking at us. They're not random, Mary whispered. Look at how they're positioned. She was right. The stone people formed a rough circle around us, like they were herding us towards something. And in the distance, I could see more of them, all facing the same direction, all facing toward the center of the mountain. It wants us to go there, Mary said, to the deep caves where it lives. A sound came from behind us, Dr. Hayes calling our names. But when we turned around, he wasn't moving anymore. He'd turned to stone mid-step, 1 foot raised like he'd been trying to follow us. Now it was just me and Mary. Why isn't it affecting you? I asked her. Cherokee blood has some protection. Not much, but some. My ancestors learned to live alongside this thing without waking it up. Then why is it awake now? Mary pointed toward the center of the mountain. Your mining company. They've been doing test drilling for 3 months. All that noise, all that vibration, it woke the thing up, and now it's hungry. The grinding sound was getting louder. All around us, the stone people were starting to move. Not walking exactly, but shifting position, turning to face us more directly. We need to get to the caves, Mary said. That's where it wants us to go. I know, but it's also the only place we can stop this. How? Mary pulled something from her backpack, a leather pouch filled with what looked like colored sand and small bones. Cherokee ritual, very old, very dangerous. But if we can reach the heart of the mountain where the thing's consciousness is strongest, we might be able to put it back to sleep. What's the catch? Mary looked at me with sad eyes. The ritual requires a sacrifice. Someone has to stay behind, let the thing absorb them, but guide it into dormancy as it happens. I understood. You mean someone has to die? Not die. Become part of the mountain, forever. Around us, the stone people were definitely moving now, taking slow, grinding steps in our direction. We had maybe 10 minutes before they reached us. Let's go, I said. The entrance to the deep caves was a crack in the mountainside, barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. Mary led the way with her flashlight, and I followed close behind. Inside, the cave opened into a massive underground chamber. My light couldn't reach the ceiling or the far walls. The air was thick and cold, and that stone dust smell was overwhelming now. But the most amazing thing was the walls themselves. They were covered in handprints, thousands of them, pressed into the solid rock like the one we'd found on the trail. But these weren't warnings. They were pleas for help. Jesus, I whispered. Everyone the mountain has ever absorbed, Mary said. Their last conscious act was to press their hands against the stone, trying to escape. I shined my light on the nearest wall. The handprints were layered on top of each other, some fresh-looking, others worn smooth by time. And between them, carved into the rock, were words in different languages. Help us. Still alive. Can't move. Please. How many people? I asked. Hundreds, maybe thousands. Going back to when the first humans came to these mountains. We kept walking deeper into the cave. The handprints on the walls were getting more frantic. They carved deeper into the stone, and I was starting to hear something, a low humming sound that seemed to come from the rock itself. That's it, Mary said. The thing's voice. It's singing. Not singing, dreaming. It dreams about the old times when the world was cold and it had all the space it needed. Now it's trying to recreate that world by absorbing everything alive. The cave split into 3 tunnels. Mary chose the center one without hesitation. How do you know which way? The sound is loudest here. She was right. The humming was getting stronger, and I could feel it in my bones now, making my teeth ache. The tunnel opened into another chamber, smaller, but filled with something that made my brain hurt to look at. The walls weren't just covered in handprints anymore. They were moving. The stone itself was rippling like water, and I could see shapes pressing against it from the inside. Human shapes. They're all still there, Mary whispered. Everyone it's ever absorbed. Trapped in the rock, but still conscious. I watched in horror as a face pressed against the stone wall, mouth open in a silent scream. Then another face, and another. The entire wall was alive with trapped people. Mary, I said, I don't think I can do this. But she was already pulling items from her leather pouch. Colored sand that glowed faintly in the darkness, small animal bones, and something that looked like dried herbs. The ritual has to be performed at the heart of the thing's consciousness, she said, arranging the materials in a circle on the cave floor. And it has to be someone the mountain has touched but not fully claimed. What do you mean? Mary pointed to my hands. I looked down and felt my heart sink. Gray patches, just small ones on my fingertips, but definitely there. When did that happen? Probably when you helped Lisa up after she fell. Or when you shook Sarah's shoulder. The thing's influence is everywhere in these caves. The humming sound was getting louder, and now I could make out something else. Voices. Hundreds of them, all whisper it, and the same thing over and over. Join us, join us, join us. That's everyone it's absorbed, Mary said. It uses their voices to call new victims. A new sound joined the whispers. Footsteps, the grinding, scraping sound of stone feet on stone floor. The granite people had found the cave entrance. We're out of time, I said. Mary nodded and began the ritual. She poured the colored sand in patterns around the circle, chanting in Cherokee. The animal bones started glowing with a pale blue light. James, she said without stopping her chant, the person who performs the sacrifice has to let the mountain absorb them, but fight it at the same time. Guide it toward sleep instead of letting it feed. How do I do that? Think about cold, about ice and snow and deep winter. The thing associates those with sleep and peace. If you can project those thoughts while it's absorbing you, it might follow you into dormancy. The footsteps were getting closer, and the voices from the walls were getting louder, more insistent. "Join us, James. It doesn't hurt. You'll be part of something bigger." I recognized some of the voices now. Mike, Sarah, Lisa, Dr. Hayes, all of them calling to me from inside the stone. "Don't listen," Mary said. "They're not really your friends anymore. The thing is, using their voices." But it was hard not to listen. Part of me wanted to give up, to let the gray spread up my arms and turn me to stone like the others. At least then, I wouldn't have to be afraid anymore. Mary finished her ritual circle and stood up. "It's ready, but James, you need to understand, once you start, there's no going back. You'll become part of the mountain forever." "What about you?" "I'll try to get out. Tell people what happened here. Make sure they seal this place permanently." The first stone person appeared at the tunnel entrance, Mike, moving with that horrible grinding wah. "Okay." Behind him I could see others. "Do it now," Mary said. I stepped into the ritual circle. Immediately I felt the mountain's consciousness pressing against my mind. It was huge and old, and hungry. It showed me visions of what it used to be, a vast network of caves and tunnels, home to creatures that lived in the deep cold. But the world had warmed, and those creatures had died, and now it was alone. "I understand," I said to the thing. "You're not evil. You're just trying to survive." The gray patches on my hands started spreading faster. I could feel my fingers getting stiff and cold. "But you can't save yourself by destroying everything else. Let me show you another way." I thought about winter, about snow falling on the mountains, about ice covering the caves, about the deep cold that the thing remembered from its youth. I thought about sleep. Peaceful, dreamless sleep where there was no hunger and no loneliness. The mountain's consciousness wrapped around my thoughts like a blanket. I felt myself getting heavier, stiffer, as the stone claimed more of my body. But I kept thinking about cold and sleep and peace. "Yes," I whispered as the gray reached my chest. "Like that. Rest now. Dream about the old times." The voices from the walls were getting quieter. The humming sound was slowing down, getting deeper, like a record player running out of power. "Sleep," I said as the stone reached my neck. "Sleep for a long time." The last thing I remember as a fully human person was Mary's face, tears streaming down her cheeks as she watched me turn to granite. I am still here. That's the hardest part to explain. My body is stone now. I know because I can see my own granite hands when I look down. But my mind is still my own. The mountain tried to absorb my consciousness like it had the others, but something about Mary's ritual protected me. I can't move, can't speak, can't call for help, but I can think and I can watch. Mary made it out of the caves. I know because park rangers found her 3 days later, stumbling along a back trail, barely conscious for ROM dehydration. She told them about a cave-in that trapped the rest of our team, a tragic accident. The official report said we were killed by falling rocks during a geological survey. Our bodies were never found, of course, because we weren't dead. We were part of the mountain now. But Mary kept her promise. Within a month, the area was declared a protected wilderness zone. No mining, no development, no more drilling to wake up the thing in the deep caves. And it worked. The mountain consciousness went back to sleep, just like I'd hoped. The voices from the walls went quiet. The stone people scattered through the forest stopped moving. I became the guardian, I guess. I stand at the entrance to the cave system, looking like just another rock formation to anyone who might wander by. But I'm watching, making sure nothing disturbs the sleeping presence below. Mary visits sometimes. She's an old woman now. This happened 35 years ago, though time moves differently when you're made of stone. She brings her granddaughter, teaching her the family responsibility. "This is James," I heard her say on their last visit. "He saved us all." I wish I could tell her I can hear everything, that I'm not suffering, not really. The mountain dreams are peaceful now, full of cold and quiet and rest. But sometimes I worry. Last week I saw survey crews on the next mountain over. They had the same kind of equipment we'd brought in 1987, same uniforms, same logo, Summit Resources. The mining company never gave up. They just moved their operation a few miles east. And this morning, I heard something that made my granite heart sink. A sound I hadn't heard in decades, carried on the wind from the neighboring peak. Drilling. The mountain under my stone feet shifted slightly, like someone turning over in their sleep. The presence in the deep caves stirred, just a little. I'm trying to project thoughts of cold and peace, trying to keep it sleeping, but I don't know how long I can hold it. If you're reading this somehow, if Mary's family kept records like I hope they did, then you need to know it's starting again. The mountain remembers everything, and it's getting hungry. Someone needs to stop the drilling before it's too late. Someone needs to remember that some places should be left alone. The mountain is dreaming of stone people again, and this time I might not be enough to keep it sleeping. My name is Dr. Amanda Cross, and I need you to know that everything I'm about to tell you really happened. I'm a wildlife biologist, been studying animals for 15 years. I have a PhD from Duke University. I've published papers in respected journals. I'm telling you this because after what happened in those North Carolina mountains, people will say, I've lost my mind. It was September 1983 when I first heard about the killings. 3 counties in western North Carolina, all reporting the same thing. Cattle found dead, completely drained of blood. But it wasn't the blood that bothered me. It was how precise the cuts were, like someone had used surgical tools. The local sheriff called my university. "We need someone who knows animals," he said. "This ain't natural." I drove out to Pisgah National Forest with my team. There was David Martinez, our photographer. He was young, maybe 25, always had his camera ready. Then Dr. Sarah Peters, a folklorist who studied mountain legends. She knew more Cherokee stories than anyone. And Tom Bearcloud, our guide. Tom was Cherokee himself, born and raised in these mountains. His grandfather had been a tribal elder. "My family's been tracking this thing for 20 years, Tom told me on our first day. "It comes back every so often, stays for a while, then disappears." We set up camp near the worst attack site. A farm family had lost 12 head of cattle in one night. The farmer, Bill Henderson, met us at his gate. His hands shook when he lit his cigarette. "Weren't no bear that did this," he said. "I've lived here 43 years, never seen anything like it." He walked us to the pasture. The grass was still stained dark, but what made my stomach turn were the trees. 15 feet up an old oak, someone, or something, had left claw marks. Deep gouges in the bark, 4 parallel lines. Each mark was at least 6 inches long. "Shaw, show me the tracks," I said. Bill led us to a muddy patch near his water trough. The prints were like nothing I'd ever seen. They looked almost human, but wrong. Too long, with what appeared to be claw marks at the tips, and they were huge, at least 14 inches from heel to toe. I knelt down and took measurements, made sketches. David photographed everything. Sarah wrote notes about the local stories she'd been collecting. "The Cherokee have a name for it," she said. "Kekla-kudla. It means the thing that feeds on life." Tom was quiet during most of our work, but as we packed up that first day, he pulled me aside. "Dr. Cross," he said, "you seem like good people, but you need to understand something. This isn't just an animal, and it's been watching us since we got here." I looked around the empty pasture. The sun was setting behind the mountains, and shadows were getting long. Everything looked normal. But Tom was right about one thing. I did feel like we were being watched. That night in our tents, I wrote in my journal about the evidence we'd collected. The claw marks were too high for any known animal. The tracks showed a bipedal gait, but the stride length suggested something that could move incredibly fast, and the surgical precision of the wounds didn't match any natural predator. My father had spent his whole career studying unknown animals, Bigfoot, lake monsters, things like that. Other scientists had laughed at him, called his work a joke. He died 5 years ago. never proving any of his theories. I wasn't going to let that happen to me. But as I lay in my sleeping bag that first night, listening to the mountain sounds, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were in over our heads. Something was out there in the darkness. Something that had been killing livestock for decades. And now it knew we were here. The next morning we found Sarah's tent torn open. Not cut, torn. Like something with massive claws had grabbed the fabric and ripped it apart. Sarah was okay, sleeping in David's tent because she'd heard strange noises around midnight, but her equipment was destroyed. Her notebooks scattered and shredded. Her recording device crushed. "What kind of bear does this?" David asked, photographing the damage. Tom examined the torn fabric. It wasn't a bear. We spent the morning collecting evidence. Hair samples caught in the tent material. More tracks around our campsite. Closer this time, circling us while we slept. I bagged everything, labeled it carefully. This was still science, even if it felt like something else. That afternoon, we interviewed more locals. The stories were all similar. Animals drained of blood, strange sounds in the night, a feeling of being watched. But one old man, Charlie Frost, told us something different. "Saw it myself back in '62, he said. Was hunting deer up on Black Mountain. Heard something moving through the trees, so I followed. Found this clearing where it was feeding." Charlie's hands shook as he lit his pipe. Thing was maybe 8 feet tall. Stood on 2 legs like a man, but wrong. Arms too long. Fingers like knives. Had wings folded against its back like a bat's wings, but bigger. Much bigger. "What did you do?" Sarah asked. "Ran," Charlie said. "Fast as I could. Never went back to that part of the mountain." That evening, we moved our camp closer to the cave system Tom had mentioned. According to him, the attacks always happened near these caves. They went deep into the mountain, connected by tunnels his people had used for centuries. "Some places are sacred," Tom explained as we hiked. "Some places are cursed. These caves, they're both." We set up our new camp as the sun went down. I was testing our radio equipment when it started happening. Static filled the air. Not normal static, something else. Voices, maybe. Speaking words I couldn't understand. "You hear that?" I asked the others. David nodded, his face pale. "What language is that?" Tom listened carefully. "A Cherokee, but Old Cherokee. The kind my great-grandfather spoke." The voices stopped as suddenly as they'd started. Our radio went dead. So did our flashlights. All of them, at the same time. We sat in complete darkness for maybe 5 minutes. No moon that night. No stars visible through the thick tree cover. Just black. Then we heard it moving. Something big was walking around our campsite. Slow, deliberate steps. Circling us like we were prey. The footsteps were heavy but somehow quiet, like whatever was making them knew how to move without disturbing the forest. "Nobody move," Tom whispered. I held my breath. The footsteps stopped directly behind my tent. I could hear breathing. Slow, deep breaths that sounded almost human, but not quite. Something was standing right there, maybe 3 feet away, separated only by thin tent fabric. The breathing stopped. For a moment, everything was silent. Then, something roared. It wasn't like any animal sound I'd ever heard. It started low, like a bear's growl, but rose into something that sounded almost like screaming. The sound seemed to come from everywhere at once, echoing off the mountains. Our equipment suddenly came back on. Flashlights blazed to life. The radio crackled with normal static. But whatever had been circling our camp was gone. We didn't sleep that night. We sat together in one tent, taking turns keeping watch. David kept checking his cameras, hoping he'd captured something. Sarah wrote down everything she could remember about the voices we'd heard. Tom just stared into the darkness beyond our light. "It's testing us," he said finally. "Seeing how we react." "Testing us for what?" I asked. Tom was quiet for a long time. "To see if we're worth keeping alive." The next morning we found tracks all around our campsite. The same impossible footprints, but more of them. Our visitor had circled us dozens of times during the night. And in the soft dirt near my tent, Something else. Symbols, scratched into the ground with what looked like claws. They formed a pattern I didn't recognize, but Sarah did. "Cherokee," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "It's a warning. It says, 'Go away or die.'" We should have listened to the warning, but I was a scientist. I needed proof. So instead of leaving, we went deeper into the mountains. Tom led us to the main cave entrance, a black hole in the mountainside that seemed to swallow our flashlight beams. "This is where it lives," Tom said. "My grandfather told me stories, said this cave goes down to the spirit world." The cave entrance was maybe 10 feet wide, but it opened into a much larger space. Our lights revealed a cavern that stretched beyond what we could see, and it wasn't empty. Bones, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. They covered the cave floor like a carpet. Most looked old, animal bones bleached white, but some were different, larger, and arranged in patterns. "Jesus," David whispered, taking photos. Sarah knelt beside one of the bone arrangements. "This is a Cherokee death ritual, but it's wrong, like someone who half remembered how to do it." I was collecting bone samples when Tom called out from deeper in the cave. "Dr. Cross, you need to see this." We followed his voice into a side chamber. What we found there made me understand we weren't dealing with just an animal. Tools, crude knives made from sharpened bones, bowls carved from skulls, and on the cave wall more symbols. These weren't scratched. They were painted in what looked like dried blood. "This shows intelligence," I said, making notes. "Tool use, symbolic thinking. Whatever this is, it's not just a predator." That's when we heard the sound from outside. A truck engine struggling up the mountain road. Then voices, human voices. We ran back to the cave entrance. In the valley below, we could see headlights. A pickup truck had stopped near our abandoned campsite. "Bill Henderson," Tom said, recognizing the truck. "What's he doing here?" We climbed to it, phoned to meet him. Bill wasn't alone. His teenage son Jake was with him. Both looked terrified. "It killed Mrs. Morrison," Bill said as soon as he saw us. "Broke into her house last night, found her this morning." Eleanor Morrison lived alone on a farm about 5 miles from the Henderson place. She was 73, had lived in these mountains her whole life. "How do you know it was the same thing?" I asked. "You'll see," Bill said. We loaded our essential gear and followed Bill's truck to the Morrison farm. What we found there changed everything. The front door had been torn off its hinges, not broken, torn away completely and thrown 30 feet into the yard. Inside, the house was destroyed. Furniture smashed, walls clawed open, kitchen cabinets ripped apart. We found Eleanor in her bedroom. I won't describe what had been done to her, but the precision of it, the surgical nature of the wounds, this wasn't random violence. This was something that knew exactly what it was doing. "Called the sheriff," Bill said. "He won't be here till tomorrow. Roads are bad up here." That meant we were on our own. As we documented the scene, Jake Henderson stayed outside. He was maybe 17, pale and shaking. When I went to check on him, he grabbed my arm. "It talked to her," he whispered. "What do you mean?" "My daddy didn't tell you everything. Old Mrs. Morrison called our house around midnight, said something was outside her door, said it was talking to her in Cherokee, trying to get her to open up." I felt cold. What did it say? "Called her by her Cherokee name, her grandmother's name. Names nobody alive should know." That night we stayed at the Henderson farm. Bill's wife Mary cooked dinner for all of us, but nobody ate much. We sat around their kitchen table, planning our next move. "We should leave," Sarah said. "Document what we have and get out of these mountains." "No," I said. "We're close to something. A discovery that could change everything we know about unknown species." David agreed with me. He'd been going through his photographs, enhancing them on his portable equipment. "Look at this," he said, showing us a photo from the cave. In the background, barely visible, was a shape, tall, thin, crouched among the bones. It looked human but wrong. Too tall, arms too long, and what might have been wings folded against its back. "I didn't see this when I took the picture," David said. "It was there the whole time, watching us." Tom studied the photo. My grandfather said the Kekla Kudla was once a man, a Cherokee medicine man who made a deal with dark spirits to protect our sacred places. But the spirits twisted him, made him into something hungry. That's just folklore, I said. Tom looked at me sadly. Is it? We decided to split up the next day. David and I would return to the caves for more evidence. Sarah and Tom would interview more locals, collect more stories. We'd meet back at the Henderson farm by evening. It was the last time I saw Sarah alive. David and I spent the morning deep in the cave system. We found more chambers, more bone arrangements. And something else. Fresh kills. A deer, drained of blood. The wounds were identical to what we'd seen on the cattle. It's feeding, I said. This is its hunting ground. That's when our radio crackled to life. Tom's voice, full of panic. Dr. Cross, we found Sarah. You need to get back here now. We ran through the forest, following the trail back to the Henderson farm. But we were too late. They'd found Sarah in a clearing halfway down the mountain. Her body was arranged like the bones in the cave, positioned according to Cherokee death rituals, but done wrong. Like something that half remembered what it meant to be human. Tom knelt beside her, tears streaming down his face. I should have protected her. But the worst part wasn't how we'd found her. It was what she'd written in her notebook before she died. Her final entry, scrawled in handwriting that got shakier, with each word. It remembers being human. It remembers Cherokee prayers. But it forgot how to be anything but hungry. It's coming for Amanda next. It knows her father's name. It knows everything. That night, as we held a makeshift funeral service for Sarah, I realized the truth. This wasn't just hunting us. It was hunting me. The attack came at dawn. I was sitting by Sarah's grave, trying to make sense of her final notes, when the forest went silent. No birds, no insects. Even the wind stopped. Tom appeared beside me, moving like a ghost. It's here. The thing that came out of the trees was worse than the stories described. 8 feet tall, but hunched over like it was trying to remember how to walk upright. Its arms were too long, hanging almost to the ground. Fingers that ended in claws like curved knives. And yes, wings. Massive, bat-like wings folded against its back. But the worst part was its face. It looked human, not entirely, but enough that you could see what it used to be. Cherokee features, but stretched and twisted. Yellow eyes that held intelligence and terrible, endless hunger. It spoke to me in a voice like wind through dead leaves. Amanda Cross, daughter of Richard Cross. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. It knew my father's name. He came here once, the creature continued. 1963, looking for monsters. I let him live because he showed respect. But you dig up sacred bones. You photograph sacred places. Tom stepped protectively in front of me. She didn't know, old father. She meant no harm. The creature's head turned toward Tom. Thomas Bear Cloud, your grandfather knew me when I was still a man, before the change, before the hunger. I know your story, Tom said. Running wolf, medicine man of the Cherokee. You made a deal with the spirits to protect our sacred places from the white settlers. The creature nodded slowly. The spirits gave me power, eternal life, strength to defend what was holy. But they made me into something else, something that needs to feed. I found my voice. How long have you been like this? Since 1838, the year they tried to move us from our homeland. I chose to become a monster rather than let them destroy everything sacred. Nearly 150 years. This thing had been hunting in these mountains for over a century. But the hunger grew stronger, it continued. At first, I only killed those who desecrated sacred places, settlers who dug up burial grounds, loggers who cut down prayer trees. But now I must feed whether there are trespassers or not. David chose that moment to try running. He made it maybe 10 feet before the creature moved. I'd never seen anything that fast. One moment it was talking to us, the next it had David pinned to the ground. "Please," David gasped. "I was just taking pictures." "Pictures steal the soul," the creature said. And then David was dead. Tom and I ran, deep into the forest, toward the cave system. Behind us, I could hear the creature following, not hurrying. It knew these mountains better than we did. It knew we couldn't escape. "There's only one way," Tom said as we reached the main cave entrance. "Cherokee law, trial by combat. If you can defeat him in single combat, he has to release his claim on you." "I can't fight that thing." "Not with weapons," Tom said. "With words, with knowledge, in the spirit realm." I didn't understand what he meant until we were deep in the cave, surrounded by centuries of bones. The creature appeared at the entrance, wings spread wide, blocking the light. "You cannot hide in here forever," it called. "I challenge you," I shouted back. "Trial by combat, according to Cherokee law." The creature laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "You are not Cherokee." "But I serve the Cherokee cause," I said, looking at Tom. "I want to protect these sacred places, too." The creature stopped laughing. "Explain." "The logging companies, the developers, they're the real threat now. Not individual trespassers. They want to clear-cut these mountains, build resorts and shopping centers. I can stop them. With my scientific credentials, my government contacts, I can get this whole area declared protected wilderness." "And what do you want in return?" "Stop killing innocent people. The cattle, the farmers, they're not desecrating anything. They're just trying to live." The creature considered this. Around us, the cave seemed to pulse with unseen energy. I could feel something building, like the air before a thunderstorm. "Very well," it said finally. "But if you fail to protect these lands, if you betray this trust, I will hunt down everyone you have ever loved and feed on them slowly." The cave filled with blinding light. When it faded, the creature was gone. In its place stood a man. Cherokee, maybe 40 years old, wearing traditional buckskins, but his eyes were still those terrible yellow orbs. "I am Running Wolf," he said, "and now we are bound together. You will be the guardian of this place, as I have been, as my curse requires." "What does that mean?" "It means you cannot leave these mountains, Amanda Cross. It means your life as a scientist is over. It means you will live here, protecting what is sacred, until someone else takes your place." I looked at Tom. He was crying. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "It's the only way." Running Wolf began to fade, becoming translucent. "The hunger will sleep now, but if these lands are threatened, if the sacred places are disturbed, it will wake, and it will be your responsibility to feed it." "Wait," I called. "What about my team? What about David and Sarah?" "They died serving a sacred purpose. Their sacrifice will be remembered." And then he was gone. The cave was silent, except for the sound of my own heartbeat. That was 41 years ago. I never went back to the university. Officially, our expedition was lost in a landslide. David and Sarah were listed as presumed dead. I was the only survivor, found wandering the mountains 3 days later with no memory of what had happened. The cover-up was easy. A few missing persons reports, some paperwork. These mountains have swallowed countless hikers over the years. Nobody asked too many questions. Tom helped me in those first months, taught me which plants to eat, how to read the weather, how to move through the forest without disturbing it. He'd bring me supplies from town, news from the outside world. "You're keeping your bargain," he said one day. "The development stopped. The logging permits got denied. Environmental Protection Act, they're calling it. I had used my connections, called in every favor I had, used my father's research, my own credentials, everything I could think of. Slowly, piece by piece, I got the government to designate over 200,000 acres as protected wilderness. It worked. The sacred places stayed safe, and Running Wolf kept his word. The killing stopped. Tom died in 1995. Natural causes. His grandson brings me supplies now. Thinks I'm just a crazy old woman who lives in the woods. He doesn't know the truth, but I'm not the only guardian anymore. Over the years, others have come. Scientists, hikers, people drawn to these mountains for reasons they can't explain. Most leave after a few days, but some stay. Some understand that they're needed here. There's Dr. James Harrison, a botanist who arrived in 1987 and never left. He catalogs the plant life, makes sure no invasive species take hold. And Maria Santos, a geologist who's been mapping the cave systems for 15 years. She makes sure no unauthorized spelunkers disturb what's down there. We're a small community. We protect each other, and we protect the mountains. Because the hunger isn't gone. It's just sleeping. Sometimes on nights when the moon is dark, I can feel it stirring. When someone cuts down a tree without permission. When tourists leave trash near a sacred site. When developers start making noise about unused wilderness arts. Those nights, I dream of yellow eyes and wings in the darkness. I dream of being 8 feet tall and hungry for blood. The curse is still there, waiting. And I understand now that Running Wolf wasn't the first guardian. There were others before him, going back centuries. Cherokee medicine men who made the same deal, accepted the same transformation, carried the same burden. When I die, someone else will take my place. Someone will have to choose between becoming a monster and letting the sacred places be destroyed. I've trained a few candidates over the years, taught them the Cherokee stories, shown them the cave paintings, explained what the symbols mean. When the time comes, one of them will make the choice I made. Because some places are too important to lose, some secrets are too dangerous to share, and some bargains once made cannot be broken. The development companies still come around sometimes. Lawyers and businessmen in expensive suits talking about economic opportunity and progress. I meet with them in town, wearing my cleanest clothes, speaking in my most professional voice. I tell them about environmental protection laws, about endangered species and watershed protection, about the legal challenges they'll face if they try to develop protected wilderness. They always leave disappointed. What I don't tell them is that if they ever actually tried to build here, if they ever brought bulldozers up these mountain roads, the hunger would wake up. And 41 years of sleeping has made it very, very strong. I'm 76 now, too old to be living alone in the mountains. My arthritis makes it hard to hike the trails. My eyes aren't what they used to be. But I can't leave. The bargain holds me here as surely as chains. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if we'd listened to that first warning scratched in the dirt by our campsite. If we'd packed up and left like smart people should have, Sarah would still be alive. David would have had a career, maybe a family. I would have had a normal life. But the sacred places would be gone. Now, strip malls and ski lodges would cover the mountains. The caves would be tourist attractions. The Cherokee burial grounds would be parking lots. Some bargains are worth making, even when the price is everything you thought you wanted. The young people ask me sometimes, the ones who stay, who feel the call to become guardians themselves, if I regret my choice. I tell them the truth, every day. But I'd make the same choice again, because on quiet nights, when the wind moves through the trees just right, I can hear the voices of all the people who lived here before us. Cherokee voices, speaking in the old language, thanking us for keeping faith with the past. And sometimes, just sometimes, I can hear my father's voice among them. He would be proud, I think. His daughter finally found the proof he spent his life searching for, even if I can never share it with the world. The beast of Black Mountain is real. It's sleeping in the caves beneath my feet, dreaming of blood and ancient hunts. And I'm the one standing guard, making sure it never has to wake up. At least not unless someone is foolish enough to threaten what we protect. Then all bets are off. My name is Father Michael O'Sullivan, and I need to tell someone what really happened in the Blue Ridge Mountains that October. The church says I should keep quiet, but some things are too important to bury. I was 44 then, been a priest for 20 years. The Vatican had sent me to investigate what they called unusual spiritual phenomena in a small Virginia town called Millbrook. 3 families claimed their dead relatives had come back. Not as ghosts, as living, breathing people who ate dinner and watched TV like nothing had happened. I drove up the winding mountain road on a gray Tuesday morning. Fog hung between the pine trees like wet sheets, and my radio kept cutting out with static. The town sat in a valley surrounded by peaks, with Raven's Ridge looming over everything like a sleeping giant. Pastor Ezekiel Thorne met me at the local diner. He was a big man with white hair and worried eyes, the kind who'd wrestled with faith his whole life. His handshake was firm, but his hands shook. "Father, I've been preaching for 38 years, he said over coffee that tasted like burnt dirt. "I've seen people die, and I've buried them proper. Dead is dead." But Margaret Tolley's husband came walking up her front steps last Thursday, 5 years after we put him in the ground. I'd read the reports on the drive up. James Tolley died of a heart attack in 1974, funeral attended by half the town. Margaret had remarried just last year. Then James showed up, looking exactly like he had the day he died, asking why she was wearing another man's ring. "Has anyone examined him?" I asked. Pastor Thorne stirred his coffee with a shaky hand. "Doc Harris looked him over. Says his temperature's wrong, too cold. But everything else checks out. Birthmarks, scars, even that chipped tooth from when he fell off his bike as a kid. He knows things only James would know." Through the diner window, I watched a flock of crows land in the parking lot. They arranged themselves in a perfect circle, not moving, just staring at our building with black eyes. A waitress noticed and dropped her coffee pot. "That's been happening all week," Pastor Thorne said. "Animals acting strange. The Hendersons' cattle won't go near the north pasture. Just stand at the fence line, mooing like they're scared." I pulled out my notebook. The church taught us to document everything. "Tell me about the others." "Emma Carson's boy Tommy came back Sunday. Been dead 2 years. Cancer. Looks healthy as can be, but his mother says he won't eat nothing but raw hamburger meat. And yesterday, old Mr. Pike saw his wife Rose in their garden. She's been buried up on the hill for 6 months." A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the October air. In all my years investigating miracles and strange events, I'd never encountered anything like this. The dead don't just come back. "Where are they now?" I asked. "That's the thing, Father. They only come out after dark. During the day, nobody sees them anywhere." As we talked, I noticed something odd about the other customers. They spoke in whispers, kept glancing at the windows. The whole town felt like it was holding its breath. I'd lost my own faith recently, if I'm being honest. 3 months ago, a drunk driver had killed 2 children from my parish, 8 and 10 years old. I'd performed their funerals, comforted their parents, but inside, I was angry. Angry at God for letting it happen. The Vatican hoped this assignment might restore my purpose, but sitting in that diner, watching those crows, I felt more lost than ever. "Pastor, I need to speak with these families. Tonight." He nodded, but his face went pale. "I'll arrange it. But Father, there's something else you should know. My congregation's splitting apart over this. Half think it's a miracle, God giving people their loved ones back. The other half thinks it's the devil's work." I looked out at Raven's Ridge, where the fog seemed thicker, darker. "What do you think?" "I think," he said slowly, "that some things are supposed to stay buried." That evening, Pastor Thorne took me to Margaret Tolley's house. It was a small white cottage with a neat garden and a picket fence. Normal in every way except for the man sitting on the front porch swing. James Tolley looked exactly like his photograph. Brown hair, kind eyes, wearing the same blue shirt he'd been buried in. But when he smiled at us, something was wrong. The smile was too wide, showing too many teeth. "Evening, Pastor," James said, standing up. His voice sounded right, but it echoed strangely, like he was speaking from the bottom of a well. "You must be the priest Margaret mentioned." Margaret appeared in the doorway. She was a thin woman in her 50s, nervous energy radiating from every movement. "Father O'Sullivan, thank you for coming. I don't know what to do." We went inside. James walked differently than in the old home movies Margaret showed me. Too smooth, like he was floating just above the ground. He sat in his old chair, the leather one by the fireplace, but it didn't creak under his weight. "James," I said carefully, "Margaret tells me you've been away for a while." He laughed, and the sound made my skin crawl. "Away? I suppose you could call it that. It was dark, Father. Very dark and very cold. But then I heard her crying and I couldn't stand it. So I came back." "How did you come back?" His eyes went black for just a second. Not metaphorically, but actually black, like deep holes in his face. "Someone helped me. Someone who understands what it's like to be wrongfully buried." Margaret gripped my arm. "He knows things, Father. Things that happened after he died. He knew about my remarriage before I told him. He knows about conversations I had when I was completely alone." I pulled out my cross, just held it in my lap. James's eyes fixed on it immediately, and his smile faded. "That won't be necessary, Father," he said. But his voice had changed. It sounded older, raspier. "I mean no harm to anyone. I just want to be with my wife." "James died of a heart attack," I said. "His body was embalmed and buried. How is he here now?" "Miracles happen," Margaret whispered. "Maybe God doesn't work like this," I said, probably too sharply. James's smile returned. "Careful, Father. Your faith is showing its cracks." I stood up, keeping the cross visible. "James, I need you to look at this and tell me what you see." For a moment his whole face changed. The skin looked gray, sunken. His eyes went completely black, and when he spoke, it wasn't his voice at all. It was a woman's voice, old and full of hate. "I see the symbol of those who burned me," the voice said. "Those who buried me at the crossroads with iron nails through my hands." Margaret screamed. James blinked, and his face returned to normal. But now he was standing across the room near the back door, though I hadn't seen him move. "I should go," he said in his regular voice. "Margaret, I'll see you tomorrow night." He walked out the back door, and when I followed him, he was gone. No footprints in the soft earth, no sound of a car starting. Just gone. Margaret collapsed in her chair, sobbing. That wasn't James talking. That was someone else. I called Pastor Thorne while she made tea with shaking hands. "We need to visit the cemetery," I told him. "Tonight." We drove up the winding road to Millbrook Cemetery in his old pickup truck. The headlights seemed dimmer than they should be, swallowed by fog that came from nowhere. When we reached James Tolley's grave, I understood why Margaret was so confused. The grave looked normal. The headstone was clean, flowers fresh. But when I knelt and pressed my ear to the ground, I heard nothing. No settling earth, no insects. It was like listening to an empty house. "Pastor, do you have a shovel?" "Father, we're not desecrating anything. We're investigating." It took us an hour to dig down 3 feet. The coffin was there, but when we pried it open, it was empty. Not just empty, it looked like it had never been used. The satin lining was perfectly clean, no impression where a body had lain. As we stood there staring, we heard laughter coming from the direction of town. Multiple voices, men and women, laughing like they were at a party. But it was 2 a.m, and the sound was coming from the old part of the cemetery, where graves dated back to the 1800s. "We should leave," Pastor Thorne whispered. But I was already walking toward the laughter. I had to know. The old section of Millbrook Cemetery sat on a hill overlooking the town. Some of the headstones were so weathered you couldn't read the names. Others had been broken and mended with cement that looked like scars. The laughter stopped when we got close. "Hello?" I called out, feeling foolish but determined. "Is someone there?" A woman's voice answered from the darkness between the headstones. "Father O'Sullivan, we've been waiting for you." I turned on my flashlight, and the beam caught a figure standing beside a large monument. It was Emma Carson, whom I'd met briefly at the diner. But she was dead. Pastor Thorne had told me she'd been killed in a car accident 3 years ago. "Emma?" Pastor Thorne's voice cracked. "But you're dead?" She stepped into the light. and I saw she was wearing the same dress they'd buried her in, but it was clean and new. Death isn't what you think it is, Ezekiel. It's just waiting in a cold place until someone calls you home. More figures emerged from behind the headstones, a dozen people, maybe more. I recognized some faces from old photographs Pastor Thorne had shown me, people who'd died over the past 10 years. They all looked exactly as they had in life, except for their eyes. Their eyes were empty, black holes that seemed to pull light into them. "What do you want?" I asked, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. An old man I didn't recognize stepped forward. "We want what was taken from us, Father. Life, family, the chance to see our loved ones grow up." "Death is part of God's plan," I said, raising my cross higher. Several of the figures took a step back, but not all of them. Emma Carson laughed. "God's plan? Where was God's plan when that drunk driver crossed the center line? Where was it when cancer ate Tommy alive? Where was it when James's heart stopped at 42? I felt my own doubts rising up like bile in my throat. These were the same questions I'd been asking myself for months. "She showed us the truth," said a young man I recognized as Tommy Carson. But Tommy had been 12 when he died, and this figure looked 16. "She showed us that we don't have to accept God's plan. We can make our own." "Who showed you?" "The one who was wronged," Emma said. "The one who understands justice." Thunder rolled across the mountains, though I hadn't seen any lightning. The returned dead began walking toward us, not threatening but inevitable like a slow tide. "Pastor, we need to leave. Now." But when I turned around, Pastor Thorne was gone. I was alone among the graves with a dozen dead people closing in. "Don't be afraid, Father," Tommy said. His voice was still a child's voice, but it carried decades of anger. "She just wants to meet you. She has a proposition." "I don't make deals with the dead." "Everyone's dead, Father. Some of us just haven't stopped walking yet." The fog thickened until I could barely see my own hands. The figures vanished one by one, their laughter fading like an echo. When the fog cleared, I was standing alone in front of a grave I hadn't noticed before. The headstone was tall and black, made from stone that seemed to absorb my flashlight beam. The inscription was carved deep. Helena Thorne Call, D. Granny Hatchet, 1832 to 1889, burned for what she knew. Below that, someone had scratched newer words into the stone. 30 years in the cold, 30 years to plan, 30 years to remember every face at the burning. I ran back to where we'd parked, but Pastor Thorne's truck was gone. I was stranded in the cemetery at 3 a.m, with no way back to town, except walking. The fog had lifted enough to show me the path, but every shadow looked like it might be hiding someone. Halfway down the mountain, I found Pastor Thorne sitting on a fallen log beside the road. He was staring at his hands like he'd never seen them before. "Pastor, what happened? Why did you leave me?" He looked up and his face was full of tears. "Father, I think I made a terrible mistake 30 years ago." "What are you talking about?" "Helena Thorne, Granny Hatchet. She was my great-great-aunt. The family never talked about her, but I found papers in my grandfather's trunk after he died. She wasn't a witch, Father. She was a healer, a midwife. She helped women when their babies wouldn't come, used herbs to ease pain." He stood up, his old bones creaking. "But when the diphtheria outbreak hit in 1889, people started dying, lots of children. They needed someone to blame, and Helena was different. She lived alone, knew things other people didn't, so they called her a witch." "Pastor, that was over 90 years ago. What does that have to do with—" "Everything!" His voice echoed off the mountains. "Don't you see? She's been waiting. Every 30 years she gets stronger. 1919, 1949, 1979. This is her year, Father. She's calling back the dead to build an army. She's going to make this town pay for what they did to her." A new voice spoke from the darkness ahead of us. "Not the town, Ezekiel. The families, the bloodlines. Everyone who carries the guilt of 1889. An old woman stepped into our flashlight beam. She was small and bent, wearing a black dress that looked like it was made from shadows. Her face was wrinkled like old leather. but her eyes burned with intelligence and fury. "Granny Hatchet," Pastor Thorne whispered. She smiled, showing teeth like broken glass. "Hello, great-great-nephew. Ready to pay your family's debt?" "I didn't burn you," Pastor Thorne said, backing away. "I wasn't even born." "But you carry their blood," Granny Hatchet said, walking closer. "You preach their lies. You wear their guilt like a family name." I stepped between them, holding up my cross. The old woman glanced at it and laughed. "Iron and wood, child. Do you think that frightens me? I was burned by men carrying crosses. I was buried with holy water on my lips. Your symbols have no power here." But she didn't come any closer. "What do you want?" I asked. Her eyes fixed on mine, and I felt like I was falling into deep water. "Justice, priest. For 90 years I've been gathering strength in the cold ground, learning, planning. The dead hear everything, you know. Every prayer, every confession, every secret whispered in the dark." She gestured toward the town below, where lights flickered in windows like trapped fireflies. 12 families condemned me. Their children and grandchildren still live in my valley, fat and happy, never paying for what their ancestors did. But now I have an army of their own dead to collect that debt. Those people you've brought back, they're not really alive, are they? Alive? Dead? Such simple words for simple minds. She reached out and touched my cheek with fingers cold as winter. They are what they choose to be, what I allow them to be. They can laugh and love and lie just like the living, or they can be hunger and hatred and revenge. The choice is theirs. Pastor Thorne found his voice. "Helena, please. These people had nothing to do with what happened to you." "Didn't they?" Her voice grew louder, echoing off the mountains. "When the Tallies needed someone to blame for their sick children, who did they point to? When the Carsons wanted a reason for their bad crops, who did they whisper about? When the town needed a scapegoat for every misfortune, whose name did they speak?" She was right, and I could see it in Pastor Thorne's face. The old fear, the old prejudice, passed down through generations like a family recipe. "But I can be merciful," Granny Hatchet continued. "Join me, priest. Use your authority to tell the people this is God's will, that the dead have returned as a blessing. Help me gather the 12 families together for a proper reunion with their ancestors." "And then what?" Her smile showed those broken glass teeth again. "Then we settle accounts. Blood for blood, pain for pain, fear for fear." I thought about Margaret Tolley, torn between joy and terror at her husband's return. About the children in town who didn't understand why Grandpa wouldn't come inside during the day. About all the innocent people caught in the middle of a 90-year-old grudge. "No," I said. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in an instant. Frost formed on the trees around us, and I could see my breath. "No?" Her voice became a shriek that made the mountains echo. "You refuse me, priest? You choose them over justice?" "I choose mercy over revenge, forgiveness over hatred." She raised her hand and I felt something invisible grab my throat. My feet left the ground. "Then you'll watch them all die before I kill you last." Pastor Thorne stepped forward, his face pale but determined. "Helena, stop. If you want a thorn, take me. I'll go willing. Just leave the others alone." She looked at him with something that might have been love, if love could be twisted by 90 years of fury. "Oh, Ezekiel, sweet boy, you think one life pays for 12? You think your death settles the debt?" She released me, and I fell hard on the rocky ground. "I want more than death, nephew. I want terror. I want despair. I want them to know what it feels like to be helpless and alone and abandoned by their God." The fog rolled in again, thicker than before. When it cleared, she was gone. But her voice lingered in the air. "Tomorrow is Halloween, priest. The night when the veil is thinnest. Come to the crossroads on Raven's Ridge at midnight. Bring the 12 families, or I'll bring them myself. And priest, your God won't help you. He never helps when it matters most." Pastor Thorne and I walked back to town in silence. The sun was coming up, painting the mountains red like blood. In the distance, church bells were ringing, calling people to Sunday service. Normal people living normal lives with no idea that their dead relatives were planning a reunion they'd never forget. "We have to warn them," I said. Pastor Thorne shook his head. "Warn them of what? That their loved ones are coming back to kill them? That an ancestor they never heard of is settling a debt from before they were born? They'll think we're crazy." He was right. But as we reached the edge of town, I saw something that made my blood freeze. Children were playing in the park, normal kids having fun. But watching them from the shadows were other children. Dead children with empty eyes and hungry smiles, waiting for the sun to set. "Pastor," I said, "we're going to need help. More help than just you and me." "What kind of help?" I looked up at Raven's Ridge, where the fog never seemed to lift completely. The kind that fights fire with fire. By Sunday evening, I'd convinced 3 other ministers and a Cherokee medicine man named Joseph Crow Feather to meet us at the crossroads. Pastor Thorne had found his grandfather's papers about Helena Thorne, and the truth was worse than we'd imagined. She hadn't just been innocent. She'd been trying to stop a real evil. Something dark had been feeding on the town in 1889, killing children and livestock. Helena had been gathering people to perform a cleansing ritual when the accusations started. They'd burned her before she could finish what she'd started. "She's not the real enemy," Joseph explained, as we hiked up Raven's Ridge by torchlight. "She's become something twisted by rage, but underneath, she's still trying to protect this valley. The thing she was fighting is still here, still hungry." We reached the crossroads at 11:45. It was exactly what you'd expect. 2 dirt roads crossing in a clearing surrounded by ancient trees. Helena's original grave was there, marked by a simple stone with iron nails driven through it. The 12 families were there too, but not by choice. They stood in a circle around the grave, their eyes empty and black. Men, women, children, all perfectly still. Behind each living person stood their dead relative, husbands, wives, parents, grandparents. The dead had their hands on the living, not quite touching, but close enough to claim them. Granny Hatchet stood at the center of it all, no longer the bent old woman I'd met on the road. She was tall now, powerful, wearing a black dress that moved like living shadow. Her eyes burned like coals. "You came, priest. Good. You can watch justice finally be done." "Helena," Joseph Crowfeather called out, stepping into the clearing. "You know me. My people knew you when you were alive. You were a healer then." She turned to him, and for a moment her face softened. "Joseph, yes, I remember your grandfather. He tried to speak for me at the trial. He did. And he told me what you were really fighting. It's still here, Helena. Still feeding. These people aren't your enemies. They're its food." "Lies," she snarled, but doubt flickered in her burning eyes. I felt it then. The real presence. Something ancient and hungry moving beneath our feet, drawn by the gathering of so many people. The ground began to tremble. "Helena," I said, "look around you. Look at what you've become. Is this justice or just more feeding for the thing you tried to stop?" The living people in the circle began to sway, their life force being drawn down into the earth. The children started to age, their hair turning gray, their faces wrinkling. "No," Helena whispered. This isn't what I wanted." But it was too late. The real enemy had been using her anger, her army of the dead, to gather food for itself. The crossroads began to crack open, revealing a pit that seemed to go down forever. That's when I understood what we had to do. "Helena," I shouted over the wind that had started howling from the pit. "You can still finish what you started. Complete the cleansing ritual. Send this thing back where it came from." She looked at me, then at the living people being drained by forces beyond her control. "I don't remember how. It's been too long." "Then let us help you," Pastor Thorne said, stepping forward. "All of us. Every faith. Working together." What followed was the strangest hour of my life. 5 religious leaders from 4 different traditions, working with the ghost of an accused witch to perform a ritual that had no name. We used Christian prayers and Cherokee songs, Baptist hymns and Catholic rites, while Helena spoke words in a language older than English. The thing in the pit fought us. It sent up shapes that looked like everyone we'd ever lost, trying to distract us with grief and guilt. It whispered our secrets and failures, trying to break our concentration with shame. But we held together, united by something stronger than fear. In the end, Helena had to make a choice. She could have her revenge and feed the ancient hunger forever, or she could sacrifice herself to seal it away. She chose sacrifice. The last thing she said before the light took her was, "Tell them I was trying to heal, not harm." The pit closed. The dead returned to their graves. The living collapsed, but were breathing, alive, themselves again. It's been 6 months now since that Halloween night. The town has healed, mostly. People don't talk about what happened, but they're kinder to each other, more forgiving of differences, more careful about holding grudges. I stayed in Millbrook, became the permanent priest for the new interfaith community center we built. My faith came back, but it's different now, wider, more accepting of mystery. Learned that God works through all kinds of people, even ones the world calls witch. Sometimes on foggy nights I see a bent old woman walking through the cemetery, tending to graves and leaving wildflowers on headstones. The people of Millbrook see her too, but they don't run anymore. They nod respectfully and say, "Evening, Granny Hatchet," because now they know the truth. She was never the monster. She was the healer. And some kinds of healing take more than one lifetime to complete. My name is Ray Hutchins, and I've been a detective with the Kentucky State Police for 15 years. I've seen car crashes that would make your stomach turn, drug deals gone wrong, and domestic violence calls that still wake me up at night. But nothing prepared me for what I found in Hell Hollow. It started with the Morrison family. 6 people, mom, dad, and 4 kids aged 8 to 16, gone without a trace from their cabin deep in the Daniel Boone National Forest. When I got the call on that cold November morning in 1985, I thought it would be straightforward. Maybe a family dispute. Maybe they just packed up and left in the middle of the night. But when I drove up that winding dirt road to their place, I knew something was very wrong. The cabin sat quiet as a grave. Their truck was still parked outside, keys dangling from the ignition. The front door hung wide open, letting the autumn wind blow dead leaves across the kitchen floor. Inside, breakfast dishes sat half-finished on the table, scrambled eggs gone cold and hard, coffee cups still warm to the touch. All their clothes were still in the closets. Money sat untouched in a jar on the counter. Even little Sally Morrison's stuffed rabbit was tucked into her bed, waiting for her to come home. But the strangest thing was what I found tacked to the kitchen wall. Children's drawings, dozens of them, all showing the same thing. A huge, dark shape with what looked like faces pressed against it. Multiple mouths, all open wide like they were screaming or hungry. The oldest boy, Tommy, had written under his picture, "It calls to us every night." I bagged the drawings and started asking questions around the area. Hell Hollow had always been a strange place, folks said. Got its name back in the 1800s when settlers massacred a group of Cherokee who were camped there. Some said it was built on an old burial ground, the sea. Cherokee had considered it sacred, but the white settlers didn't care about that. "Temperature's always 10 degrees colder down in that hollow," old Pete Sawyer told me at the general store. "Trees don't grow right neither, all twisted and sickly. Animals avoid the place unless they're running from something worse." But it was preacher Josiah Whitman who really got my attention. The old fundamentalist minister was 68, thin as a rail, with eyes that burned like hot coals. He ran a small church about 5 miles from the hollow. "Detective," he said when I visited him, "some places are cursed by God's own wrath. Hell Hollow is one of them. The Morrison family. They ain't the first to disappear from there." He pulled out a leather journal, pages yellow with age. I've been keeping track since I came to minister here 30 years ago. Families go missing every 7 years, always the same way. The Johnsons in 1930, the Smiths in 1937, the Williams family in 1944, always in November, always the whole family at once. I studied his records. 8 families over 55 years, 36 people total. All vanished without leaving any sign of struggle or violence. The pattern was too clear to ignore. Why just families, I asked. Why not individuals? Preacher Whitman's face went pale. Because that's what it needs. That's what feeds it. What feeds it? But he wouldn't say more. Just kept muttering Bible verses under his breath and looking toward the hollow like something might come crawling out of it. That night, I drove home to my own family with a sick feeling in my gut. My wife Linda was making dinner while our 2 kids, Amy and Jake, did homework at the kitchen table. They looked so normal, so safe. But I couldn't shake the image of those drawings, all those hungry mouths waiting in the dark. Amy looked up from her math problems. "Daddy, why do you look so worried?" "Just work stuff, honey. Nothing for you to worry about." But I was lying, because when I'd walked through that empty Morrison cabin, I'd felt something watching me. Something patient and old and very, very hungry. And that night, as I lay in bed listening to the wind howl through the trees, I could have sworn I heard someone calling my name from far away in the darkness. The next morning, I started digging deeper into the missing families. The state police files went back to 1965, but most of the earlier disappearances had been handled by local sheriff's departments that were either understaffed or didn't keep good records. What I found made my blood run cold. Every single family had shown the same pattern before vanishing. Neighbors reported they'd become withdrawn, stopped coming to town, pulled their kids out of school. Several families had been seen walking single file toward the hollow in the days before they disappeared, like they were in some kind of trance. It was the strangest thing, Mrs. Kowalski told me. She'd lived near the Williams family back in 1944. I saw them walking past my house at dawn, all 6 of them, moving slow and steady like they were sleepwalking. Little Mary Williams, she couldn't have been more than 4, but she was keeping up just fine. They were all looking straight ahead, not talking, not looking around, just walking toward that damned hollow. I spent 3 days combing through the forest around the Morrison cabin. That's when I found the bones. They were arranged in perfect circles, hidden under piles of dead leaves. Animal bones mostly, deer, rabbits, birds. But some looked human, small ones that might have belonged to children. Each circle had strange symbols carved into the trees around it. Not Cherokee, according to the university professor I sent photos to. Something much older. The forest itself felt wrong. Even in broad daylight, shadows seemed too thick. Birds didn't sing. Squirrels and deer stayed away. The trees grew in twisted shapes, like they were trying to get away from something buried in the earth. And I kept hearing things. Whispers when the wind blew. Footsteps behind me that stopped when I turned around. Once, I could have sworn I heard a child crying somewhere deep in the woods, but when I followed the sound, it always seemed to move further away. On the 4th day, I found the cave. It was hidden behind a wall of thorny bushes about a mile from the Morrison place. The opening was just big enough for a person to crawl through. I called for backup and went in with flashlights and rope. The cave stretched back further than my light could reach. The walls were covered with more of those strange symbols, carved so deep they looked fresh despite being obviously ancient. But it was the smell that hit me first, sweet and rotten, like flowers left too long in a grave. Officer Danny Mills was with me, a good kid about 25 years old. He'd grown up in the area and knew all the local stories. "Jesus Christ, Detective," he whispered, covering his nose with his sleeve. "What died in here?" "I don't think anything died, Danny. I think something's been living." We found evidence of human habitation going back years, maybe decades. Sleeping areas lined with old blankets and clothes. Canned food, some of it dating back to the 1960s. Children's toys scattered around like a playroom. But the deeper we went, the worse it got. The walls started showing scratch marks, like fingernails digging into stone. The symbols became more frequent. more frantic. And at the very back of the cave, we found something that made us both run for the entrance. Photographs. Hundreds of them, pinned to the cave walls. Pictures of families. The Morrisons, the Williams family, the Johnsons, all the missing families, smiling and happy in front of their homes or at family gatherings. But someone had been watching them, taking pictures from a distance for years before they disappear. And at the center of it all was a photograph of my own family. Linda and the kids at Amy's birthday party last month, taken from our backyard through our kitchen window. I grabbed the photo and ran, Danny right behind me. We didn't stop until we reached our patrol car, both of us shaking like leaves. "Detective," Danny said, trying to catch his breath. "Someone's been watching our families for a long time. Planning. Waiting." I radioed for more units and called Linda to make sure she and the kids were okay. "They were fine," she said, "just finishing lunch." But her voice sounded strange, distant. "Ray, honey, I've been having the strangest dreams lately. About walking in the woods. It feels so peaceful, so right. The kids have been having them too." My blood turned to ice. "What kind of dreams?" "There's this voice calling to us. It says it's time to come home, to be together forever, just our family. No more worries, no more pain. Just peace and love and—" "Linda, listen to me carefully. Don't go outside. Don't let the kids out of your sight. I'm coming home right now." "But Ray, it's such a beautiful day. The kids want to take a walk in the woods behind the house, just for a few minutes. What could it hurt?" I was already racing down the mountain road, siren blaring. "Linda, promise me, stay inside, lock the doors. Don't listen to anything you hear calling from outside." There was a long pause. When she spoke again, her voice was dreamy, like she was half asleep. "Okay, honey, if you say so. But the voice is so beautiful, and it knows our names." I made it home in 20 minutes, breaking every speed limit between Hell Hollow and town. Linda met me at the door with a strange smile on her face. "Ray, you're being silly. There's nothing wrong. We just want to take a nice walk as a family." Amy and Jake stood behind her, holding hands. They looked at me with blank, peaceful expressions that made my skin crawl. These weren't my children. Something was already inside their heads. "Kids, go to your rooms," I said. "Now." "But Daddy," Amy said in a voice too. "Ooh, calm for a 10-year-old. We hear it calling. It says it's time to come home. To the place where families are never separated." I spent the rest of the day making phone calls, trying to find somewhere safe to take my family. But every expert I talked to, psychologists, psychiatrists, even a priest, said the same thing. Mass hallucinations, stress, maybe some kind of gas leak or contaminated water causing brain problems. Nobody wanted to hear about monsters or curses or Cherokee burial grounds. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room with my service weapon, watching the windows and doors. Around 3 a.m, I heard it. A voice, soft and sweet as honey, drifting in from the forest behind our house. It sounded like a combination of every human voice I'd ever heard, all speaking in perfect harmony. "Ray, Linda, Amy, Jake, it's time to come home. We've been waiting so long for you. Your family belongs with us, forever and always." I looked toward the bedrooms. The hallway was empty, but I could see 3 figures standing at the back door, silhouetted against the glass. My family, trying to go outside. "Stop," I whispered, raising my gun. But these were my wife and children. How could I point a weapon at them? Linda turned to look at me. Her eyes were completely black, like pools of oil. "Ray, don't fight it. This is what we're meant to do. What we've always been meant to do. The families that came before us, they're still together, still happy, still whole." "Daddy," Amy said, her child's voice echoing strangely. "It doesn't hurt. They're all still alive, just different, better. They don't age or get sick or die. They're part of something bigger now." I backed toward the phone, keeping my gun trained on them. They didn't seem scared. They just watched me with those terrible black eyes, smiling like they knew something I didn't. I called Danny Mace. I need backup at my house. My family's been affected. They're trying to go to Hell Hollow. Detective, I hate to tell you this, but half the families in town are acting strange. Tonight, people walking toward the hollow in their pajamas. The sheriff's got every available unit out trying to round them up, but they keep slipping away. Through the window, I could see our neighbors walking slowly down the street. The Hendersons with their 3 kids, old Mr. Patterson from next door, all moving in the same direction toward the forest. It's happening everywhere, Danny continued. Whatever's in that hollow, it's calling to everyone at once, but it only seems to affect complete families. Single people, divorced folks, widows, they're all fine. It only wants families. That's when I understood. The thing in Hell Hollow didn't just feed on people. It fed on the bonds between them, the love, the connection, the invisible threads that tied families together. That's why it took whole families at once and left everyone else alone. I looked at my wife and children still standing by the door like statues. What happens if I come with you? I asked Linda. We'll be together forever, Ray. All of us. And all the others who came before. One big family full of love and peace and joy. And if I don't? Her smile never wavered, but something cold flickered behind those black eyes. Then you'll be alone. And we'll still go home. Because that's where we belong now. I had maybe an hour before sunrise. Whatever this thing was, it seemed stronger at night. If I was going to save my family, I had to go back to Hell Hollow and face it directly. I grabbed my backup weapon, extra ammunition, and a flashlight. As I headed for the door, Linda spoke one more time. Ray, you can't fight something that's been here since before your people stole this land. It was here when the Cherokee came, and it was here when they left. It feeds on what makes humans human, their need to belong, to be part of something bigger than themselves. Fighting it is like fighting the need to breathe. Maybe, I said, holstering my weapon. But I'm a stubborn man, and those are my kids. As I drove back toward Hell Hollow, I could see families walking along every road that led to the forest. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all moving slowly and steadily toward the same destination. And in the distance, I could hear that voice getting stronger, promising peace and love and eternal togetherness to anyone willing to give up their individual self for the good of the family. But I'd been a cop long enough to know that anything that sounded too good to be true usually was. I parked at the entrance to Hell Hollow just as the first hints of dawn touched the sky. Families were emerging from the forest in a steady stream, all walking toward the hidden cave I'd found earlier. Men, women, children of all ages, their faces blank and peaceful. I recognized some of them. The Morrison family was there, looking exactly the same as they had in their missing person photos. But they'd been gone for 2 weeks. They should have been hungry, dirty, desperate. Instead, they looked healthy and well-fed, like they'd been living in comfort somewhere. Behind them came the Williams family, who disappeared in 1944. They hadn't aged a day. The children were still children. The parents looked exactly as they had in their old photographs. And at the back of the procession came my own family. I followed at a distance, my hand on my gun, but knowing it probably wouldn't do any good against whatever was controlling them. The cave entrance had been widened somehow, big enough now for people to walk through easily. Inside, the cave had changed too. The narrow tunnel I'd crawled through days before had become a wide passage leading deep into the earth. The walls pulsed with a faint red light that seemed to come from the rock itself. The families moved in single file, parents holding children, hands, everyone calm and quiet. I could hear that voice getting stronger as we went deeper, speaking in a language that was older than English, older than Cherokee, older than anything. Human. The passage opened into a vast underground chamber. In the center sat something that made me understand why the Cherokee had considered this place sacred and why they'd been afraid of it. It was huge, maybe 30 feet across, shaped roughly like a tree but made of what looked like human flesh. Arms and legs and torsos grew from its trunk like branches. Faces pressed out from its surface, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. All the missing families, absorbed into this thing but somehow still aware, still conscious. The faces were smiling. "Ray," one of them called out, and I recognized Mrs. Morrison's voice. "Don't be afraid. It's wonderful here. We're all together, all part of the same family now. No more loneliness, no more pain, no more death." Around the base of the creature, I saw Preacher Whitman and about 20 members of his congregation. They weren't in a trance like the families. They were fully aware, wearing robes covered in those strange symbols. "Welcome, Detective," Whitman called out. "You're just in time for the feeding. Every 7 years, our guardian needs nourishment. Family bonds, love, connection, that's what keeps it strong. And in return, it keeps those families alive forever, united in perfect harmony. You're feeding people to that thing," I said, raising my gun. "We're saving them," one of the congregation members replied. "Death separates families. Divorce breaks them apart. Children grow up and leave home. But here, they stay together forever." I watched in horror as the first family, people I didn't recognize, probably from out of town, walked toward the creature. It opened what looked like a mouth in its trunk, wide enough for them to step inside. They did so without hesitation, disappearing into the thing's body. Immediately, new faces appeared on its surface. The family I'd just watched die, but they were smiling, looking peaceful and content. "You see," Whitman said, "they're not dead. They're more alive than they ever were before." My family was next in line. I started forward, but 2 of the congregation members grabbed my arms. "Let them go, Detective. Fighting will only cause pain. This is what they want now, what they need." Linda looked back at me one last time. For just a second, her eyes cleared, and I saw my real wife looking out. "Ray," she whispered, and I could hear the fear in her voice. "Help us. It's in our heads, making us want this. But underneath, God, Ray, we're so scared." That was all I needed. I broke free from the men holding me and charged toward the creature, firing my weapon at its trunk. The bullets hit, but didn't seem to cause any damage. Instead, the thing let out a sound like 100 voices screaming in harmony. The faces on its surface all turned to look at me, and I heard every missing family speaking at once. "You can't hurt us, Ray. We're part of it now. Hurting it hurts us." But I wasn't trying to hurt it. I was trying to distract it. While it focused on me, I pulled out the dynamite I'd taken from a construction site on the way over. Working as a state police detective, I'd learned that sometimes you needed more than bullets to solve a problem. "Ray, no!" Linda screamed. And this time it was really her voice, not the thing controlling her. "If you kill it, you kill all of us." I looked at my wife and children, then at all the faces staring at me from the creature's surface. Dozens of families trapped forever in this thing's body, conscious but unable to escape. "Maybe that's better than this," I said, and lit the fuse. The explosion brought down half the cave. I grabbed my family and ran for the entrance as rocks fell all around us. Behind us, I could hear the creature screaming with 1,000 voices, the sound of all those trapped families crying out as it died. We made it out just as the cave system collapsed completely. Linda and the kids were themselves again, confused and terrified, but alive. The other families wandered, around in a daze, freed from the creature's control but traumatized by the experience. Most of Preacher Whitman's congregation was buried in the collapse. The old preacher himself survived, but he never spoke again. Just sat in the county jail, staring at nothing and mumbling prayers under his breath. The official report blamed the whole incident on a gas leak in the cave system that caused mass hallucinations. The families were treated for exposure and psychological trauma, then quietly relocated to other parts of the state. The area around Hell Hollow was declared geologically unstable and permanently closed to the public. But the real story was more complicated. Linda and the kids recovered from their ordeal, but they were never quite the same. They remembered everything, being controlled by the creature, feeling its hunger, hearing the voices of all the trapped families. Amy started drawing pictures of the faces she'd seen on the creature's surface. Jake became obsessed with genealogy, trying to identify all the missing families from her drawings. "They're still out there, Dad," he told me one night. All those people. Just because the thing is dead doesn't mean they're at peace. They were trapped for so long, and now they're lost. I left the state police 6 months later. Couldn't handle investigating normal crimes after what I'd seen in Hell Hollow. Instead, I started a private practice helping families of missing persons. Using what Amy Drew and Jake researched, we've been able to bring closure to dozens of families, telling them what really happened to their loved ones. The creature is dead, but its influence lingers. I've found similar disappearance patterns in other parts of Appalachian Kentucky. Different entities, same hunger for family bonds. It seems like Hell Hollow wasn't unique, just the most organized. Sometimes, late at night, Linda will wake up, screaming. She says she can still hear all those voices, all those families calling out for help. And sometimes, when the wind blows just right through our bedroom window, I hear them too. The Cherokee were right to avoid Hell Hollow. Some places are meant to stay wild, meant to keep their secrets buried deep in the earth. When we dig them up, when we build our homes on sacred ground and pretend the old warnings don't matter, we invite things into our world that should have stayed asleep. I keep a bag packed by the front door now, and I've taught my family escape routes from every room in the house, because I know that somewhere in the mountains of Kentucky, there are other hollows, other caves, other hungry things waiting for families to come close enough to feed. And sooner or later, they're going to call our names again. The Cherokee used to say that the land remembers everything. Every drop of blood spilled, every life taken, every family torn apart. Hell Hollow remembered the massacre from the 1800s, and it turned that memory into something that fed on the very thing the killers had destroyed, the sacred bonds between people who love each other. I sleep with my gun under my pillow now, and I've taught Amy and Jake how to recognize the signs of supernatural influence. Because I learned something in that cave that I'll never forget. There are things in this world that are older and hungrier than we can imagine, and the only thing standing between them and our families is our willingness to fight for the people we love, even when that fight seems impossible to win. My name is Jake Morrison, and I should have listened to the old man at the gas station. I was filling up my Jeep that morning in June 1976, getting ready to take 5 city folks into the Monongahela forest for what they called a team-building experience. The old man pumping gas next to me kept staring at my camping gear. "You ain't heading into the deep woods, are you?" he asked, his voice scratchy like old leather. "Just a 3-day camping trip," I said. "Nothing fancy." He shook his head slow. "Them woods ain't right. Haven't been right since the logging company went in there 2 months back. None of them boys came out." I should have asked more questions, but I needed the money bad. My little brother Tommy was in the hospital down in Charleston, and the bills were piling up like snow in winter. These corporate people were paying me good money to show them real wilderness. The 5 of them were waiting at the forest entrance when I pulled up. Mr. Bradley was the boss man, a big guy in expensive hiking boots that had never seen dirt. Lisa Chen was the marketing lady, all nervous energy and city smiles. The other 3 looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. "You're our guide?" Bradley asked, looking me up and down. I guess I didn't look like much in my old army jacket and worn jeans. "Yes, sir. Jake Morrison. I know these woods better than anyone." That was true. I'd been hunting and fishing here since I was 12. Even spent time here after I got back from Vietnam trying to get my head straight. We loaded up and started hiking. The trail was easy at first, wide and well marked. The corporate folks chattered about their jobs and their plans, normal stuff. But as we got deeper into the forest, things got quiet. Real quiet. I noticed it first because of my time in the jungle. In Vietnam, when the birds stopped singing, that meant trouble. Same thing here. No birds. No insects buzzing. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. "Is it always this quiet?" Lisa asked, her voice sounding too loud. "Sometimes," I lied. In 20 years of walking these woods, I'd never heard silence like this. We kept walking. That's when I saw the first twisted tree. It was a big oak, maybe 100 years old, but it looked wrong. The trunk was twisted like a corkscrew, spiraling up toward the sky. The bark was stripped off in perfect lines, making patterns that hurt to look at. "What happened to that tree?" Bradley asked. I walked closer. The wood underneath the bark was black, like it had been burned from the inside. But there was no smell of fire, just a sweet, sick smell, like flowers left too long in water. "Disease, maybe," I said. But I'd never seen tree disease do anything like this. We set up camp in a clearing about a mile past the twisted tree. The corporate folks seemed happy enough, building their fire and opening cans of fancy camp food, but I kept watching the tree line. Something was watching us back. I felt it like pressure behind my eyes, the same feeling I used to get in Vietnam when Charlie was out there in the jungle, waiting. My hands started shaking a little, so I busied myself checking our supplies. "You okay, Jake?" Lisa asked. She was nice, nicer than the others. "Just tired," I said. But I wasn't tired. I was scared. And I hadn't been truly scared since the war. As the sun went down, the feeling got stronger, like we were animals in a zoo being watched by something hungry. I built up the fire bigger than normal and suggested we all stay close to camp. "What's the problem?" Bradley asked. "Afraid of bears?" "Something like that," I said. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every little sound made me jump. Around 3 a.m, I heard something big moving through the trees. Footsteps, but wrong somehow. Too wide apart. And too heavy. I grabbed my flashlight and rifle and crept to the edge of camp. The beam cut through the darkness, showing nothing but trees and shadows. But those shadows seemed to move when I wasn't looking straight at them. Then I heard it. A sound like wind through leaves, but shaped into words. "Come. Deeper." My blood went cold. I'd heard voices in Vietnam too, usually right before an attack. But this was different. This voice didn't sound human. I spent the rest of the night sitting by the fire, rifle across my knees, watching the woods. When morning came, I found huge footprints in the soft dirt near our tents. 5 toes like a person's foot, but 3 times too big. The claws had dug deep gouges in the earth. I tried to cover them up before the others woke up, but Bradley saw me doing it. "What are you hiding, Morrison?" I looked at him, then at the others gathering around. They trusted me to keep them safe. They'd paid me to bring them home alive. "We need to leave," I said. "Right now." Bradley laughed, but it sounded forced. "We just got here yesterday. We paid for 3 days." "The weather's turning bad," I lied, looking at the clear morning sky. "Morrison, if you're trying to squeeze more money out of us..." "I'm trying to keep you alive," I said, louder than I meant to. That got their attention. Lisa stepped closer, her face worried. "Jake, what's wrong? What did you see?" I couldn't tell them about the footprints or the voice. They'd think I was crazy. Hell, maybe I was. The war had messed with my head pretty good. Sometimes I still heard helicopters that weren't there. "It's just a feeling," I said. "These woods don't feel right." Bradley crossed his arms. "A feeling? We're supposed to pack up and leave because of a feeling?" The others started taking sides. Lisa and 2 of the guys wanted to trust me. Bradley and his buddy Jim wanted to stay. While they argued, I walked the edge of our camp, looking for more signs. That's when I found the tree. It was about 50 yards from where we'd slept, a big pine that had been changed. The true tint. NK was split open like a giant had cracked it with his fist. Inside the split, the wood was carved into shapes, symbols maybe, or just random cuts. But they were deep and precise, like they'd been made with tools, or claws. Lisa came up behind me. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Don't touch it," I said, grabbing her arm. The carved wood was warm, not sun warm, but body warm, like something alive was inside the tree. And there was that sweet, sick smell again, stronger now. "What could do this?" she asked. Before I could answer, we heard Bradley shouting from camp. Not angry shouting, scared shouting. We ran back to find him standing over his tent. The whole thing had been shredded, long tears running from top to bottom. His sleeping bag was pulled out and ripped apart, stuffing scattered everywhere. "What the hell?" Jim said. I knelt down and looked at the tears. Clean cuts, too clean for any animal I knew, and they went right through the heavy canvas like it was paper. "Bear?" Bradley asked, but his voice was shaky now. "No," I said. "Bears don't cut, they tear." "Then what?" I stood up, my mind racing. In Vietnam, we'd sometimes find camps that had been hit by something we couldn't explain. Local legends talked about things in the jungle that weren't quite human. I'd always figured it was just stories to scare us. Maybe I was wrong. "Pack up," I said. "Now, we're leaving." This time, nobody argued. It took us 20 minutes to get our gear together. Bradley's tent was ruined, so we had to redistribute his stuff among the other packs. While we worked, I kept checking the trees around us. The forest was still too quiet, and I could feel that pressure again, like something watching us from the shadows. We started hiking back toward the main trail. I kept us moving fast, maybe too fast for city folks with heavy packs. But something was following us. I could hear it moving, through the trees, keeping pace with us but staying out of sight. After an hour, Lisa called for a rest break. The group was tired and starting to complain. I wanted to keep moving, but they needed water and rest. 5 minutes, I said. Then we keep going. That's when Tom Bradley wandered off. I was checking our position on my map when Jim asked, "Where's Tom?" I looked up. Bradley was gone. "He was right here," Lisa said. "He said he needed to, he went behind those trees." I grabbed my rifle and headed toward the thick cluster of pines where she pointed. "Tom," I called. "Bradley!" No answer. The trees were close together here, blocking out most of the sunlight. I pushed through the branches, following what looked like a trail. Behind me, I could hear the others calling Bradley's name. I found him 20 feet up in the air. He was hanging from a thick branch, but not by rope. Something had lifted him up there and stuck him to the tree. His arms and legs were pressed against the trunk like he was hugging it, but I could see that bark and skin had somehow grown together. His eyes were open, still blinking. "Help me," he whispered. I raised my rifle, not sure what I was aiming at, and that's when I saw it. The shadow behind the tree moved wrong, like it was thick as oil, and in that shadow, I saw eyes, big as dinner plates, glowing yellow-green. The thing looked at me for maybe 3 seconds. Then it melted back into the darkness between the trees. Bradley screamed. I ran back to the others, my heart hammering. "We have to go, now!" "What about Tom?" Jim asked. I looked back at the trees. Bradley had stopped screaming. "He's gone," I said. We ran. I led them through the forest as fast as I could, crashing through bushes and jumping over fallen logs. Behind us, something big moved through the trees. I could hear branches breaking and leaves rustling, but every time I looked back, there was nothing there. Just shadows that seemed too thick. After 30 minutes of running, the others couldn't go anymore. Jim collapsed against a tree, gasping. Elisa was crying. The other 2 guys just stared at me like I'd lost my mind. "What happened to Bradley?" Jim demanded between breaths. I couldn't tell them the truth. Hell, I wasn't sure what the truth was. "Something got him," I said. "Something? What something?" "I don't know." That was a lie. I had an idea, but it was crazy. The kind of idea that got you locked up in the mental ward. We were lost. I'd been running blind, just trying to get distance between us and it. My compass was spinning like a top, and I couldn't see the sun through the thick trees overhead. "Which way back to the road?" Lisa asked. I looked around. All the trees looked the same now. Big, old, and wrong somehow. The bark on some of them showed those twisted spiral patterns like the one we'd seen yesterday. "I'm not sure," I admitted. Jim stood up, his face red. "You're not sure? You're supposed to be the guide." "The compass isn't working. And these trees, they weren't like this yesterday." It was true. The forest had changed. Trees that should have been miles away were now right next to us. Paths that had been clear yesterday were blocked by fallen logs that looked like they'd been there for years. Something was playing with us. "My watch stopped," Lisa said, staring at her wrist. I checked mine. The hands were spinning backward. "What the hell is going on?" Jim whispered. Before I could answer, we heard singing. A woman's voice, sweet and sad, drifting through the trees. The tune was familiar, but I couldn't place it. "Lisa?" Jim called. "Lisa, is that you?" But Lisa was right next to us, her face pale as paper. The singing got closer. Now I could make out words, though they didn't sound quite right. Like someone singing a song they'd only heard once, getting some of the words wrong. "Come play with me. Come stay with me. In the deep, deep woods." "We need to move," I said. But when I turned around, there was a wall of trees blocking our path, thick trunks grown so close together that we couldn't squeeze between them. I could swear those trees hadn't been there, a minute ago. "This way," I said, pointing to what looked like an opening. We pushed through, branches grabbing at our clothes in packs. The singing followed us, sometimes close, sometimes far away. Sometimes it sounded like one voice, sometimes like a whole choir. That's when we found the second body. It was Lisa, our Lisa, the one who'd been walking right next to us. She was sitting against a tree about 30 yards away, perfectly still. "Lisa!" Jim called, running toward her. "Wait," I said, but he didn't listen. I caught up to him just as he reached her. She was smiling, but her eyes were empty. Black, like holes in her head, and she was cold. Ice cold. "That's not her," I said. Jim looked back at our group. Lisa was still there, staring at her own dead body with horror. "How is that possible?" she whispered. The thing wearing Lisa's face turned its head toward us with a sound like breaking sticks. When it opened its mouth, that singing voice came out. "Come play with me." I put 3 rifle bullets into its chest. The impacts knocked it backward, but it kept smiling. Black stuff leaked out of the holes instead of blood. Then it melted, just dissolved into the ground, like snow in spring. "Jesus Christ," Jim said. "Jesus Christ, what was that?" I was asking myself the same question, but somewhere in my mind, I remembered stories my grandmother used to tell. Cherokee stories about things that lived in deep forests, things that could copy people, steal their faces. Skinwalkers, she'd called them. But this was different. Worse. "We need to get out of these woods," I said. "Right now." But when we looked around, we were surrounded by more trees than before. They formed a perfect circle around us, their branches touching overhead like a roof. And carved into each trunk were those same spiral symbols we'd been seeing. In the growing darkness, I heard Bradley's voice calling from somewhere outside the circle. "Jake, help me, Jake. I'm still alive." Lisa started crying. "That's not really him, is it?" "No," I said. "It's not." The voices multiplied. Bradley, then Tom, then Lisa's voice calling from different directions, all asking for help, all sounding hurt and scared. I checked my rifle. 4 bullets left. "Stay close," I told the others. "Whatever happens, don't listen to the voices. Don't trust anything you see. And don't let go of each other." Because now I knew what we were dealing with, and I knew we were probably all going to die. The thing came for us at midnight. I was keeping watch while the others tried to sleep, though none of us really could. The voices had been getting louder all evening. Bradley begging for help, Lisa singing that twisted lullaby. Sometimes I heard my own voice calling from the darkness, which was the worst part. The fire was burning low when the shadows started moving wrong. At first I thought it was just the flames making tricks with light. But then I saw it clearly. A shadow detached itself from a tree and flowed across the ground like spilled oil. It was huge, maybe 12 feet tall when it stood up. The shape was almost human, but stretched out, arms too long, fingers that ended in claws. Its head was wrong too, bigger than it should be, with those dinner plate eyes glowing in the darkness. It looked right at me and smiled. Too many teeth. "Jake Morrison," it said in Bradley's voice. "You led them to me. Thank you." I raised my rifle, but my hands were shaking. Not from fear, from memory. The thing looked too much like the shadows I used to see in Vietnam, the ones that came with the nightmares. "You're not real," I said. It laughed, and the sound was like breaking glass. "Real enough to taste you." The shadow reached toward our camp, and suddenly Lisa was screaming. One of the men, I couldn't tell which one in the darkness, was being dragged toward the trees by something I couldn't see. "Help me!" he yelled. "Something's got my leg!" I fired twice in the direction of his voice, but hit nothing but air. When the gunshots stopped echoing, so did the screaming. That left 3 of us. "What do you want?" I called to the shadow thing. "I want to feed," it said, circling our dying fire. "I want to grow. This forest is mine now. These trees are mine, and soon you will be mine." Jim tried to run. He bolted for what looked like an opening between the trees, but the shadow moved faster than anything had a right to move. 1 second Jim was running. The next he was 20 feet up in the air, wrapped in darkness. I heard his bones breaking. Just me and Lisa now. "The Cherokee knew about me," the thing said, dropping Jim's body like a rag doll. "They fed me sometimes. Criminals, enemies, just enough to keep me sleeping. But then the white men came with their machines, cut down my grove, disturbed my rest. Now I'm hungry, so very hungry." I understood then. The logging company Bradley's firm had mentioned. They must have cut down something they shouldn't have. Woken up something that had been sleeping for a long time. "You can't have her," I said, pulling Lisa behind me. The shadow thing's eyes focused on me. "You interest me, Jake Morrison. You have death on your hands already. I can smell it. How many men did you kill in the jungle?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. I saw faces in my memory. Enemy soldiers. Some not much more than kids. I'd been good at killing in Vietnam. Too good. "That's different," I said. "Is it? You led these people into my domain. You could have turned back, but you needed their money. How is that different from murder?" Lisa grabbed my arm. "Jake, don't listen to it." But the thing's words were worming into my head. It was right. I had led them here. I'd ignored the warnings, the signs. I'd been so worried about Tommy's medical bills that I'd walked 5 people into hell. "I can give you what you want," the shadow said. I'm moving closer. "Your brother's life, his health. All I ask is the girl." I looked at Lisa. She was maybe 25, scared but trying to be brave. She had her whole life ahead of her. Then I thought about Tommy, lying in that hospital bed, getting sicker every day. For a second, I almost did it. The thing saw the hesitation in my eyes and smiled wider. "That's right, Jake. You know what the right choice is." Instead, I pulled a grenade from my jacket pocket. Army surplus from my Vietnam gear, something I'd been carrying for luck. "You're right," I said. "I do know the right choice." I pulled the pin and held up the grenade so the shadow could see it. 5 seconds, I told Lisa. "When I let go, you run for that gap between the trees. Don't look back. Don't stop. Don't listen to any voices. Just run until you hit the road." "Jake, no," she said. 4 seconds. "Go." She ran. The shadow thing started to follow her, but I stepped into its path. 3 seconds. "Your choice, ugly. You can chase her, or you can try to stop me." It chose to stop me, flowing toward me like a black tide. But it was too late. "Tell my brother I'm sorry," I said, and let go. Lisa made it out. The explosion brought the Forest Service, the state police, even some FBI guys who asked a lot of questions and wrote down very little. They found pieces of me scattered around what was left of a grove of twisted trees. The official report said, "Wilderness accident with explosive device." They never found the others' bodies. The fire burned for 3 days, despite the Forest Service's best efforts. When it finally went out, that whole section of woods was ash and charred stumps. But funny thing, within a month, new growth started coming up. Healthy, normal trees, green grass, flowers. Birds came back. The whole area felt clean in a way it hadn't in years. Lisa told them what she could, but who was going? G to believe a story about shadow monsters and walking trees. They figured she was traumatized, seeing things that weren't there. She used the life insurance money from all 5 policies to pay for Tommy's treatment. The company tried to fight it, claimed I'd been negligent, but she hired a good lawyer. Tommy got his surgery and got better. He lives down in Charleston now, has kids of his own. Sometimes he comes up to visit the little memorial the local veterans put up for me. Just a simple stone marker at the forest entrance with my name and "He served" carved into it. Lisa comes too, every year on the anniversary. She's older now, works for the Forest Service. She keeps that section of woods protected, makes sure no logging companies get permits, no developers come sniffing around. Because even though the thing is gone, she knows there might be others. The old Cherokee stories talk about more than one, and lately there have been reports from other parts of Appalachia. Hikers going missing, trees found twisted in impossible shapes. The woods are patient. They've been here longer than we have, and they'll be here after we're gone. Most of the time they're peaceful, beautiful even. But sometimes, if you go deep enough into the dark places, you might find something that's been waiting for you, something hungry. Lisa keeps an eye on those reports, coordinates with other forest rangers, shares information. She's got my old rifle now, and she knows how to use it. She's also got something else I never had. She listens to the warnings. My name is Dr. Sarah Holloway, and I need to tell you what happened in the mountains of Virginia in March 1981. Some things stay with you forever, no matter how hard you try to forget them. I was 37 then, working as a pediatrician for the state health department. My life had fallen apart pretty badly. My husband left me. I was facing a nasty lawsuit from a patient's family, and I needed to get away from everything. When the assignment came up to check on some isolated mountain families, I jumped at the chance. The report was simple enough. Someone had called in a tip about kids living in terrible conditions near an old mining town called Copper Creek. The place had been abandoned since 1962 when a mine collapse killed 47 workers. But apparently, some families had stayed behind, living off the grid in the old mining shacks. I drove up there with Nurse Betty Jo Caldwell, a local woman who knew the mountain families. Betty Jo was in her 50s, tough as nails, and had been delivering babies and treating sick folks in those hills for decades. "You sure about this, Doc?" Betty Jo asked as we bounced along the dirt road in my beat-up Ford station wagon. "These mountain folks don't take kindly to outsiders, especially government types." "We're just here to help," I said, gripping the steering wheel as we hit another pothole. "Kids need their shots, basic medical care. It's not like we're here to take anyone away." Betty Jo snorted. "Tell that to them." The road got worse as we climbed higher. The trees looked wrong somehow, too thin, too pale. I noticed dead birds hanging from some of the branches, their feathers bone white. Even the squirrels we saw seemed different, their fur so light it was almost transparent. "What's with all the white animals?" I asked. Betty Jo shrugged. "Mining country. Chemicals in the water, I guess. Been that way since I was little." We rounded a bend and saw the settlement. About a dozen ramshackle buildings scattered across a clearing, most of them old mining structures that looked ready to fall down. Smoke rose from a few chimneys, and I could see vegetable gardens between the houses, though the plants looked stunted and strange. A group of adults came out to meet us as we parked. They moved slowly, their faces hard and suspicious. Most were thin and weathered, dressed in patched clothes that had seen better years. "We don't need any help," said a tall man with a gray beard. "Best you folks turn around and go back where you came from." "I'm Dr. Holloway," I said, getting out of the car with my medical bag. "The state sent me to do wellness checks on the children. Make sure everyone's healthy, give out some vaccinations." "Our kids are fine," said a woman with prematurely white hair. "We take care of our own." That's when I saw the first child. She was maybe 8 years old, standing in the doorway of one of the shacks. But something was very wrong with her. Her skin was so pale it was almost see-through, like white paper. Her hair was completely white, not gray like an old person's, but pure white like fresh snow. And her eyes were huge and the palest blue I'd ever seen. "Good Lord," Betty Jo whispered beside me. The child stared at us for a moment, then disappeared back into the darkness of the house. "How many children live here?" I asked, trying to keep my voice professional. 12, the bearded man said reluctantly. "And they're all healthy as can be." But as we talked, I saw more of them. They moved like shadows between the buildings, always staying in the shade, always watching us with those enormous pale eyes. Not one of them looked normal. They all had that same translucent skin, that same shock of white hair. In all my years as a doctor, I'd never seen anything like it. The adults finally agreed to let me examine the children, but only if I did it in their own homes. They wouldn't bring the kids to a central location, and they made it clear that Betty Jo and I were being watched every second. The first house I entered was dark as a cave. Heavy blankets covered all the windows, and the family had only a few candles burning. It took my eyes a moment to adjust. "Light hurts them," explained the mother, a thin woman named Mary. "Always has." 3 children sat on a worn couch, all of them staring at me with those huge eyes. The youngest looked about 5, the oldest maybe 10. They didn't move or speak, just watched. "Hi there," I said, kneeling down with my medical bag. "I'm Dr. Sarah. I just want to make sure you're feeling good." None of them responded. They didn't even blink. I started with the oldest, a boy who might have weighed 50 pounds soaking wet. When I touched his arm to take his pulse, his skin felt strange, cool and smooth, almost like touching marble. His pulse was slow but steady. The strange thing was, even though these kids looked severely malnourished, they weren't acting sick. No runny noses, no coughing, no signs of weakness or fatigue. They just sat there, perfectly still, perfectly quiet. "Do they ever talk?" I asked Mary. "When they need to," she said. "They don't need words much. They understand each other just fine." I took some blood samples, which was the weirdest part. When I pricked their fingers, the blood that came out was darker than normal, almost purple. And the kids didn't react to the needle at all. No crying, no pulling away, nothing. In the second house, I found 4 more children, all with the same pale features. But here I noticed something else. The family had jars full of copper pennies sitting around, and the kids were playing with chunks of copper ore like they were toys. "They like the copper," the father explained when he saw me staring. "Calms them down." I watched as a little girl, maybe 6 years old, held a piece of copper ore up to her ear like she was listening to it. Her pale lips curved into the first smile I'd seen from any of these children. By the time I finished examining all 12 kids, I was completely baffled. According to everything I knew about medicine, these children should have been dying. They were severely underweight, their blood work would probably show major nutritional deficiencies, and they lived in conditions that should have made them constantly sick. But they weren't sick. If anything, they seemed healthier than most kids I treated back in the city. That night, Betty Jo and I stayed in a small cabin the community had prepared for us. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those pale faces, those enormous eyes. Around midnight, I heard something outside. Soft footsteps, like children playing. I got up and looked out the window. All 12 children were standing in the clearing, arranged in a perfect circle. They weren't moving or talking, just standing there in the moonlight, their white hair glowing like halos. As I watched, they all turned to look directly at my window, 12 pairs of pale eyes staring right at me. I jerked back from the window, my heart pounding. When I looked again a few seconds later, they were gone. "Betty Jo," I whispered, shaking her awake. "Did you see that?" She sat up, instantly alert. "See what?" "The children. They were all outside, standing in a circle." Betty Jo went to the window and looked out. The clearing was empty. "Ain't nothing there now, Doc." But when I looked again, I could see footprints in the dirt. Small footprints, arranged in a perfect circle, exactly where I'd seen the children standing. The next morning, I sent the blood samples to the state lab for testing and started asking more questions about the history of Copper Creek. What I learned made my skin crawl. The mining disaster in 1962 hadn't been an accident. according to old newspaper reports. I found in the local library the miners had been extracting something unusual from deep in the mountain, some kind of rare mineral that the government was very interested in. The official report blamed faulty equipment for the collapse, but several witnesses claimed they'd heard explosions coming from deep underground, like someone had deliberately sealed off part of the mine. The families who stayed behind were mostly the wives and children of the dead miners. Over the years, they'd formed their own little community, completely cut off from the outside world. They grew their own food, made their own clothes, and took care of their own problems. And somewhere along the way, their children had started changing. It began about 10 years after the disaster, an old-timer in town told me. First, just a few babies born with that pale skin and white hair. Folks figured it was the chemicals from the mining, poisoned water or something. But it got worse? I asked. He nodded. Every child born up there looks the same now, and they're different. Folks in town don't like to talk about it, but we've all heard the stories. What kind of stories? He looked around to make sure no one was listening, then leaned closer. They say those kids can do things, predict when storms are coming, find water in the driest wells, know when someone's coming up the mountain long before they should be able to see them. I thought about the circle of children staring at my window, how they'd all turn to look at me at exactly the same moment. When I got back to the settlement that afternoon, I decided to explore a little. The adults were busy with their daily work, and the children seemed to have disappeared somewhere. I walked toward the old mine entrance, which was supposed to be sealed off. It wasn't sealed off. Not completely. The main entrance had been blocked with rocks and old timbers, but there was a smaller opening to the side, just big enough for a person to squeeze through. Fresh footprints led into the darkness, small footprints. I got my flashlight and followed them. The tunnel was narrow and damp, carved through solid rock. My light beam showed copper veins running through the stone walls, gleaming like metal threads. The air smelled strange, metallic, and sharp. About 50 yards in, the tunnel opened into a larger chamber. What I saw there made me stop breathing. The 12 children were there, but they weren't just standing around. They were working, moving through the chamber like they owned it, touching the copper veins in the walls, somehow extracting chunks of ore with their bare hands. As I watched, one of the little girls pressed her palm against a section of rock. The stone seemed to crumble away, revealing a perfect nugget of copper ore underneath. She plucked it out and added it to a pile with dozens of others. They were mining. These pale, silent children were mining copper with nothing but their hands, and they were doing it in complete darkness. Not one of them had a flashlight or torch, but they moved around the chamber like they could see perfectly. That's when one of them noticed me. The boy I'd examined the day before, the oldest one, turned and looked directly at where I was hiding. Even though I was standing in shadows with my flashlight off, his pale eyes found me instantly. He didn't say anything. He just stared at me with those huge eyes, and somehow I knew I was in terrible danger. I backed away slowly, trying not to make any noise. But as I turned to run, I heard something that chilled me to the bone. All 12 children were humming, the same low musical note, perfectly in harmony. It seemed to come from the walls themselves, vibrating through the rock and into my bones. I ran through that tunnel faster than I'd ever run in my life, stumbling and scraping my arms on the rough walls. Behind me, the humming got louder and louder, following me like a living thing. I burst out of the mine ran and kept running until I reached the settlement. Betty Jo took one look at my face and knew something was very wrong. "What happened to you?" "We have to leave," I gasped, trying to catch my breath. "Right now. Something's not right about these children." But before Betty Jo could answer, we heard vehicles coming up the mountain road. Big vehicles, moving fast. 3 black SUVs pulled into the clearing, followed by a military truck. Armed soldiers jumped out, surrounding the settlement. A man in an expensive suit got out of the lead SUV and walked toward us. "Dr. Holloway, I'm Agent Morrison, Department of Energy. We need to talk." Agent Morrison didn't waste time with pleasantries. He led Betty Jo and me into one of the abandoned buildings and spread out a collection of files and photographs on a dusty table. "How much do you know about what really happened here in 1962? He asked. I know 47 miners died in a collapse, I said. Morrison shook his head. The collapse was intentional. The miners had discovered something extraordinary, a mineral formation that shouldn't exist anywhere on Earth. We're talking about elements that could revolutionize energy production, military technology, everything. He showed me photographs from inside the mine, pictures that looked like science fiction. Crystalline formations growing from the walls, glowing with their own light. Metal veins that seemed to pulse like living tissue. The government tried to extract it safely, Morrison continued, but every team we sent in came back changed, sick. The mineral formations were radioactive, but in a way we'd never seen before. It was like they were alive, responding to human presence. So you sealed the mine, Betty Jo said. We had to, but we made one mistake. We left behind the families of the dead miners, and some of them were already pregnant. Morrison pulled out another set of photos, and my blood went cold. They showed children who looked exactly like the ones I'd been examining, pale, translucent skin, white hair, enormous eyes. The mineral exposure affected their development in the womb, Morrison explained. Each generation has been more adapted to the environment, more capable of surviving the radiation, and more capable of accessing the mineral formations. You're saying these children are mutants? I asked. I'm saying they're evolved. They can extract and process minerals that our most advanced equipment can't touch. Their bodies have adapted to convert copper into something their systems can use. They're living mining equipment. Through the window, I could see soldiers setting up equipment around the settlement. The adult residents were being herded into a group, their faces full of fear and anger. What are you going to do to them? Betty Jo asked. The children will be relocated to a secure facility where they can be studied and put to productive use. The adults, Morrison shrugged. National security requires certain sacrifices. That's when the humming started. It began low, almost below the range of hearing, but it made the building shake. Dust fell from the ceiling, and the windows rattled in their frames. Morrison cursed and spoke into his radio. Alpha Team, report. What's your status? The only answer was static. The humming got louder. Outside, I could hear soldiers shouting, their voices full of panic. Morrison ran to the window, and what he saw made him go pale. The ground around the settlement was cracking, not random cracks, but perfect geometric patterns spreading out from the old mine entrance. And from those cracks, copper-colored light was starting to seep up from deep underground. Impossible, Morrison whispered. But it wasn't impossible. The children were doing this. I looked out and saw them emerging from the mine entrance, all 12 of them, walking in perfect formation. Their pale skin was glowing with the same copper-colored light that was coming from the cracks in the ground. As they moved forward, the soldiers' equipment began to fail. Radios died with a squeal of static. Vehicle engines coughed and went silent. Even the soldiers' weapons seemed to jam. The minerals, I realized. They're interfering with the electronics somehow. The children spread out in their circle formation, just like I'd seen them do the night before. But now I could see what they were really doing. They were connected to the mineral formations deep underground, drawing power from them, controlling them. Morrison was screaming into his dead radio, trying to call for backup. But the children had cut off all communication. One of them, the little girl I'd seen playing with copper ore, looked directly at me through the window. When our eyes met, I heard her voice in my head, clear as if she was standing next to me. Help us. The battle, if you could call it that, lasted less than an hour. The children didn't hurt anyone directly. They didn't have to. They simply made the ground itself rise up in waves, creating barriers that trapped the soldiers but didn't crush them. They caused every piece of electronic equipment to fail completely. And they opened up new cracks in the earth that released gases which made everyone who breathed them fall into a deep sleep. Everyone except me. When I tried to understand why I was still conscious, the oldest boy approached me. Up close, I could see that his eyes weren't just pale. They had tiny flecks of copper in them, like metal shavings. You tried to help us, he said out loud, his voice rusty from lack of use. The mountain knows. That's when I realized what had happened. My blood work from the day before, the samples I'd sent to the lab, they'd been contaminated with the same minerals that had changed the children. I was beginning to change too. I could feel it starting. A strange coolness in my blood, a new sensitivity to light and something else. A connection to the copper formations deep underground, like hearing a distant song. Morrison and his soldiers were loaded into their own vehicles by the adult resided, hence, all of them deeply unconscious. Betty Jo helped me carry them to the edge of the settlement. "What are you going to do with them?" I asked. "Nothing," said the bearded man who'd first challenged us. "They'll wake up at the bottom of the mountain with no memory of how they got there. Happens sometimes to folks who spend too much time near the old mines." "And me?" He looked at me with something like sympathy. "That's your choice, Doc. You can leave now before the change goes too far. Go back to your old life and forget what you saw here. Or you can stay. Help us protect the children. Be their doctor, like you wanted." I looked back at the 12 pale children standing in their circle. They were still glowing faintly with that copper light, still connected to something deep and ancient in the mountain. As a doctor, I should have been terrified. These children were so far from normal that they challenged everything I thought I knew about human biology. But as a person who had spent her whole life trying to help kids, I saw something different. I saw children who had been abandoned by the world, who had adapted and survived in impossible conditions, who had learned to protect themselves and their families with abilities that science couldn't explain. They needed someone to understand them, someone to make sure they stayed healthy and safe, someone to keep their secrets. I sent Betty Jo down the mountain with the unconscious soldiers. She promised to report that Dr. Holloway had been killed in a mining accident, that my body was lost somewhere deep in the abandoned tunnels. That was 40 years ago. I'm still here, still taking care of the pale children of Copper Creek. My hair turned white within 6 months, and my skin became translucent like theirs. I can see in the dark now, and I can feel the copper formations singing deep in the mountain. There are this, Bertai's 7 children now, all pale and strange and beautiful. They mine copper with their hands and predict earthquakes weeks before they happen. They speak to each other without words and glow like lanterns in the darkness. And sometimes, late at night, I write down what I remember about the outside world, just in case someone else needs to know the truth about what lives in these mountains. Just in case someone else needs to understand that evolution doesn't always happen the way the textbooks say it should. The children are calling to me now. There's work to be done deep in the mine, copper to be gathered, secrets to be kept. My name was Dr. Sarah Holloway. Now I'm something else entirely. And I've never been happier.